Hey friends, welcome to Shigaraki. So today we are gonna see, what if Deku had the Soulfire Quirk? So before we start, check out my Patreon page for 18+ exclusive mature content. We will now proceed to the video. The day I, Izuku Midoriya, got my quirk was a strange one. At the time I was only 4 years old. The day was a little different. While most of the day was normal with me getting ridiculed for being quirkless, it was a little different as I had gotten beaten extra that day. I had stepped in when Kachan tried to beat up a random girl who was the shortest in the class. She had talked back to Kachan, and since she only had what he deemed a weak quirk, he tried to beat her up, but I had stepped in and took the brunt of the beating while she ran. I'm fairly certain that was the day I realized that not everyone is born equal, as kicks and punches some normal, some enhanced by tiny explosions rained down on me as the teachers looked on with disgusting satisfaction as they saw the quirkless kid getting taught their place, or some teachers looked away in quiet shame. It was as the school day ended and I made my way into my quiet home, my mom always having to be at work at this hour. In a sickening routine, I made my way to the bathroom to get the bruises and burns patched up, as well as having to sew my clothes afterwards. But it was as I went to open the mirror to our medical supplies that I realized something odd. There were no burns whatsoever, and even the bruises were extremely light in comparison to ever before, but I was only a child, so I thought nothing of it and moved on with my day, and then it was I went to sleep that my whole life changed from then on. When I awoke, I never truly awoke. Instead, I was in an odd void-like place, and in this place that was black and white and no color whatsoever. Off in the distances there were stars. That was the only way to describe them at the time. I counted 16 in total, and before I noticed it, one of the stars started to getting closer. It was pure orange in color, and before I realized it was as though I was looking up at a pure orange sky. Pure instinct of the fear of the unknown made me want to run, but I quickly found I was rooted to the spot, and then the orange sky swallowed me whole. At this point I was close to freaking out, but then the sky seemed to open up, and emerging from it was a pure orange flame that seemed to shine brighter than the sky, and as it gently flowed down to me, I was at the edge of a panic attack, but suddenly the orange flame lunged at me, and as though instinct my right hand was jerked upward and the flame struck it, and suddenly I was flooded with a sense of calm. I watched enraptured as the flame seemed to flow around my hand before wrapping itself around my middle finger and began to take the shape of a ring. But the most interesting thing about the ring was its design. It was the shape of a hexagon with 6 sections at each side, but the middle was cut off from the rest of the sides, and in the middle rested a pure orange gem, and around it at each side were 6 onyx stones, and deep in the middle of the ring was an interactive emblem that was hard to make out but seemed to have bullets in it. But at my young, precious age, I forgot something crucial in this seeming dream of flame. Abruptly the sky began to rotating downward, and as it made its way down, the orange to brown, and as the rich-looking earth finally was underneath of me, I felt as though I really was standing on something, but suddenly the each in front of my ruptured as though earthquake was occurring, and from this rupture a pure orange flame flowed of the crack. Understanding what I needed to do, I stuck my left hand out, and the brown flame instantly launched itself at my hand and immediately began forming another ring around my middle finger. Both the ring born from the sky and the ring born from the earth were incredibly similar, but the ring granted to me by the sky looked more elongated, and the gem in the middle of it was brown. Raising both of my hands up to look at the rings, the orange seemed to bring a sense of warmth but also elusiveness and longing, while the brown one brought a sense of homeliness but also understanding and sadness. The orange was his father, the brown was his mother. Suddenly the area around me began to contort around the ring on my left, and suddenly chains grew around it, choking it. Suddenly I was in the middle of the void again, but this time the black star seemed to eclipse the golden star, while 7 of the stars seemed to be chained and another 6 frozen. Only the orange sky was untouched. Abruptly I started to fade and was left with the sense he was not ready. But this part of the dream of flame is sealed. Izuku suddenly found himself waking up to his collector's edition All Might alarm clock. He then drowsily turned it off and went to rub his eye when suddenly he felt something blunt and heavy hit his eyebrow as he reached for his eye, and quickly realized it's the ring. He was shocked, and in his shock the last thing he expected was for the ring to start sparking and then promptly explode into a campfire-sized pure orange flame, whereupon seeing this, Izuku promptly fainted, and with the disappearance of his consciousness so too did the flames disappear. To the rest of the world it was a quite early morning, but to one Inko Midoriya, it was anything but. The first red flag was the sound of a fire waking her from her slumber. The next red flag was when she heard her child, Izuku Midoriya, scream out in fear. The third and final red flag was the resulting thump that sounded out after her child abruptly went quiet. A rush of motherly fueled adrenaline rushed through her veins like hot fire. Her body springing out of her bed at a speed only a parent scared for their child could. In only 2 seconds her door was ripped open and the hallway crossed before her son's door was busted into. In an instant her eyes took everything inside of the room. The first thing her mind realized was that her son was in his bed, seemingly asleep, but his yell earlier denied it was normal sleep. The next thing that caught her attention was how the room was above acceptable temperatures considering it was late spring. The last and final thing to catch her attention was that new odd ring that rested on her son's middle finger. Brow furrowing in confusion, Inko instantly moved to her son's side and began the process of waking him up. "Izuku honey, you need to wake up, mommy has some questions, come on, up you get." Izuku audibly groaned from the obvious effort of fighting off the want to continue sleeping in his sleepy state. Inko had to take a little bit of time to wake Izuku up, but when she did, she quickly got a very confusing answer to her questions. Mom, I had this really weird dream. There was this weird looking sky and this super bright flame, and then it went foo, and then it turned into a really cool looking ring. Wait. Me waking up to it being there wasn't a dream." Izuku had soon launched into describing a very confusing dream, though Inko was fairly certain it was just a side effect of his quirk coming in while he was asleep. Suddenly, as he refocused on the now obvious ring from the dream before it suddenly lit on fire. The fire surrounding the ring was a sight to behold, its pure orange coloring defying any impurities any normal flame would have. It burned bright and rapidly began increasing the temperature in the room, though curiously the flame released no smoke whatsoever. Oh, this was so exciting, there was so much to do. Her baby had a quirk even when it shouldn't have been possible. But first, honey, we need to go to the quirk doctor soon. But first put out that flame and go eat breakfast and then get ready real fast. I need to go call the nice doctor. Okay? Izuku beamed up at her before replying. "'Kay mom. But be fast." Instantly, like he had teleported, her little boy blazed out of his room. "Put out your quirk," Inko yelled after her little boy as he had forgotten to put out his quirk before leaving his room. Almost instantly the heat inside of the house began to dissipate as the small flickering sound of her son's quirk disappeared. Inko couldn't stop her bad tick at biting her lower lip when she began to think. She just couldn't quite figure out the situation. Both she and her long-gone husband had suspected that Izuku would get some kind of pyrokinesis-type quirk, even with her admittedly weak telekinesis quirk and Hisashi's fire-breathing quirk only leaving too many options on what her son's quirk would be. The flame just seemed so different and unexpected. She just hoped this had no ill consequences, like letting her husband never know about Izuku's newly developed quirk. "I was so excited then. For breakfast I had pulled out yesterday's leftover katsudon and ate that. Though mom wasn't mad at me for that luckily, though the look she gave me told me that if today had not been such a special day, I would have been in big trouble. Well, Izuku honey, I called a new quirk doctor since the old one clearly can't be trusted. And we will be heading up there as soon as you're done eating, okay? Also make sure you don't set anything on fire before we leave." "Okay mom." I quickly began to scarf down my food, too excited to just sit around to savor the flavor of my favorite when the opportunity to learn more about my quirk was only just out of reach. When I was done, mom and I got ready and we headed out to the nearest train heading to the place mom said the new doctor would be. "Well, Ms. Midoriya, we have a potential theory on why little Midoriya here was first diagnosed quirkless." The new doctor was talking to mom with an almost resigned and excited voice. The man wore the normal doctor attire, though where his fingertips would normally be were instead lenses that apparently could see through skin to see the bones beneath. other than that the Dr. Normal had a fairly bland face with black hair done up in a bland and businessman-like way. Well, we would be extremely excited to hear it. Mom's voice set all kinds of alarms off at how pissed she was hearing about my original diagnoses, but her smile seemed to almost be plastered on like that time Kachan swore in front of her for the first time. His sob-filled screams of mercy still haunted my dreams. Well, Ms. Midoriya, your son has an extremely rare case of the fourth type of quirk someone can have. The doctor droned on, unaffected by the potential danger, and instead gave them more questions than answers. Now I understand what you may be wondering, but globally there are the well-known three types a quirk can be: emitter, transformation, and mutation, but of the populace that are quirked, only 0.5% even have the slightest chance of being born with the rare fourth type, item. Item quirks are, as the name says, it's a quirk that is in essence an item. Though it's not well known, an individual can be born with a quirk that is a perfect replication of an item that seems to have a quirk. Though these quirked items can occur naturally, they mostly occur from humans. The bombshell the doctor had dropped on them rocked both Midoriya family members, but doctor wasn't done. Of course, because of how well of a kept secret item type quirks are, before you can leave the room we will having you be signing a gag order, as only you two are allowed to know this information. Only the leasing of an extremely high position person such a Principal Nedzu from UA would ever allow someone like you, Izuku Midoriya, from ever being allowed to use your quirk in public. Now I know there are laws that say people cannot use quirks in public. But this law is largely ignored, but there will be a 24/7 monitoring on you, and if you are ever reported by the government agents watching you that you used your quirk in public view, then we will have no choice but to silence you. I understand this seems extremely, but item-type quirks can be used by other people even if the individual already has a quirk. And as long as the host of the item quirk is dead, then the item can be used by someone else unless properly destroyed. The doctor's eyes were cold and uncaring of my new predicament. I wasn't even allowed to tell anyone what my quirk was unless I made sure it never got out to someone else. Now, those with item-type quirks don't seem to have quirks from normal testing, so there is the reasoning for that. Now for general information is that item-type quirks are near indestructible while their first host is still alive. Now, what will your quirk be? The doctor's constant and inconsistent jumping from topic to topic left me for a loop, and I ended up saying the first thing to Mink. Soul Flame. It closely resonated with the fact that the dream seemed so much like peering into my soul, and it was where I first saw the flame, so it felt fitting. The doctor simply nodded before handing both me and Mom documents that were the gag orders. After that both me and Mom got up and left, both still shocked beyond belief. Both me and my mom left the clinic quietly. Mom had a document folder with details on the experiments they had run on my quirk under her arm, but both of us were just ready to go home. The next day I was sort of just despondent. Ever so often during class one would glance at the ring resting on my hand. The revelation that there was a fourth type of quirks out in the world still rocked me. The very fact that these quirks took the shapes of items, and if natural made in nature instead of a person, anyone could use one. But one thing that stuck out to me yesterday as I thought it over was that the doctor said that only 5% of the quirked population had a chance to develop item quirk, not that 0.5% actually had item quirks. I was still mulling over this new information when I felt a tap on my shoulder, and as I turned I was greeted by the sight of Minami Iba standing behind me. Minami was the shortest girl in the class but had one of the most unique quirks out of the whole class. Love was her quirk, though she said she didn't know how exactly it worked beyond that it required love, though now the question was what she needed with me. You're Midoriya-san, right? I nodded in confusion at what she needed. Almost instantly her face became brighter as an excited smile seemed to be directed at me. I just wanted to thank you for saving me the other day, and I was sort of curious, are you planning to be a hero? I nodded in embarrassment as I was still unused to talking to girls or getting compliments from people other than my mom or auntie. Wow, me too. I'm going to be called La Brava. Hey wait. You want to come play heroes and villains with me? We could even be a team. Her excited smile sucked me in almost instantly and I ended up trailing behind her as she took my hand to run off to the playground, At the time I didn't know that was the beginning of a very special and strong bond between us that would last for a very long time. After meeting Minami, or as she preferred I call her, La Brava, many things changed over time, such as me revealing to her that I wasn't quirkless, since even the teachers at school were not allowed to know about my quirk. To say she was skeptical was an understatement, but luckily I had slowly gotten used to feeling when the watchers were, well, watching, and a break when they switched who was watching me allowed me to show her. Annoyingly, the first time I had ever tried to train my quirk with a curtain at my window, the watchers had shown up with a recording of a thermal image, showing when the flames would appear. After that incident I had learned to train as long as I could when a switch happened, or when I guessed when one happened anyway, and had even taught myself how to create heatless flames, which I later dubbed soft flames as they were much easier to make. One odd aspect I had discovered in my small experiments over the years was the odd and sudden ability to turn objects my soft flames touched to stone. A very odd and suddenly ability to suddenly use petrification that only worked through the flame's contact, and the few times I tried I discovered the hard flames that had heat to him also had the ability. Even more interesting was that objects that were petrified burned easier under the heat of the hard flames compared to any other objects, even more so than more flammable objects like paper or candle wicks. A few miles away atop a skyscraper, a man used his one available eye to look through a telescope to watch both the Midoriya residents and the hidden watchers. Sighing softly, the pink and sandy blonde-haired man took a long drag of his cigar before turning his attention to his new partner. The man's partner was a woman with a modest height and modest curves, the roots of her hair starting blue before fading to magenta at the tips of her long hair. But her fairly bland look was ruined by the bright purple gothic Lolita dress she wore while having luminescent bright blue star-shaped eyes. Well, the thing that made her stand out the most was her constantly bloodthirsty grin that was only ever hidden by her purple mushroom-shaped umbrella. "Well, Jacob, can we nab the kid or should we eliminate him and take the item?" Jacob sighed at the all-too-happy sound of Mary's voice at the idea of killing a kid. He could never understand why she was so happy to jump the gun when she herself was born with an item quirk and knew that there was no point in taking a premature item quirk. Considering how quickly we found the kid, the normal procedure would be to nab him, but it seems that the innocent Midoriya family seems to have some contacts with All for One himself, and the boss was very explicit about making sure absolutely zero information on item quirks reaches him, and while leaving them alive with the information is troublesome. If we make too big of commotion, if by chance we survive the wave of heroes and villains chasing after us, the boss will finish us off himself. Jacob rolled his eye when he heard Mary tisk behind him before he heard the telltale sound of shifting thread. Turning, he found Mary's dress was now reduced to a short skirt and a crop top, a garish purple sniper rifle now resting in her hands. "Come on. I need some action in my life. There's nothing like getting a free shot at the boogeyman himself that would make a girl excited." Mary's bloodthirsty grin was in full force. It was times like these, Jacob lamented that the sole reason he was stuck with her was that he was always calm. Sighing at his partner's tendency to break protocol, Jacob reached up and took off the eye patch resting over his right eye. Opening his eyelid revealed a fake eye that seemed to be made of emerald. To a normal person, it would just look like he was a rich guy who lost an eye, but Mary instantly shriveled at the sight of Jacob's own item quirk. "Fine, this place is a bust and I don't plan on spending my time watching some kid." With a loud huff, Mary backed down before the sniper rifle in her hands unraveled like thread before reconstructing itself into her normal dress. Taking another drag of his cig, Jacob turned and used the old-timey pirate-like telescope and located the watchers again. Grunting a bit at the stamina loss, the telescope suddenly shined before through the lens of the telescope. Beacons marking the watchers' locations suddenly appeared. Nodding to himself at the completed recon, he folded the telescope back up and followed Mary as she completed making a circle using chalk. Walking into the middle, she put a large Roman numeral 2 in the middle before Jacob quickly joined her in the chalk circle. Once he was inside, the chalk suddenly turned pitch black before teleporting both of them away. As Izuku playfully juggled with his soft flame in the form of a ball, He stopped as he felt a shiver down his spine. By now Izuku was certain that his ability to figure out the Watcher's positions and shifts was unnatural, even leading him to question if he had an instinct-based clairvoyant quirk along with Soul Flame. But the doctors had done extensive research and found no quirk in his body, his ring being the only thing to have a quirk. Regardless of its origin, Izuku had long since stopped doubting his almost prophetic instincts, so he was more than a little worried as he felt a shiver down his spine as he had the uncomfortable feeling that other people other than the Watchers were, watching him. Long tense seconds passed before he felt a sudden spike of dread that just as quickly disappeared before the feeling of being watched by the unknown party disappeared altogether. Looking at his shaking arms covered in a cold sweat, Izuku briefly considered telling the Watchers, but the fear of being even more restrained as they would inevitably combat his instincts to make it impossible for him to use his quirk at all stilled Izuku's mouth. That and the more likely possibility of being outright ignored or diagnosed with early stages of paranoia from having to hide his quirk getting to him. The worst-case scenario is them suspecting he told someone and they unanimously decide to kill him before the information of item quirks could possibly leak any further. Shaking his head of the thoughts of what the Watchers would do if he told them he suspected someone else was watching him, Izuku kept his mouth shut as he made a second ball of soft flame to juggle with the first. 2 years later, now 8, Izuku had come to somewhat expand his understanding of his near-clairvoyant, prophetic instincts, having dubbed the phenomenon as hyper-intuition. A few good comparisons are phenomena like déjà vu, a gut feeling, a woman's intuition, the parental instincts of a mother or father that allowed them to sniff out any lies or secrets children tried to tell or hide while also feeling when their child was in danger, and even the feeling of being watched or followed without actually being able to see anyone. To a point, Izuku had come to realize that hyper-intuition was all of those phenomena rolled into one and amped up to 11. At first, his hyper-intuition only ever responded to be watched and killer intent. Credit to both the Watchers and Katsuki for helping him figure that out, considering the Watchers were always watching him, and Izuku's hyper-intuition almost always blared like a danger alarm when Katsuki or his goons went on the hunt for him. But it wasn't long after when his hyper-intuition also showed capabilities similar to parental instincts. Izuku was well aware he was a bright child, he even proudly held second place in his school at academics. But the whole reason he was able to accomplish that was because of his new capabilities as he began to slowly but surely not only precisely dissect people's quirks, but even their personalities, intentions, and Izuku had slowly become infamous among the staff for being able to sniff out any bullshit quirkiest. Teachers tried to pull on him or the other students with nearly useless or not so pre-mutation quirks. Speaking of those mutation students, Izuku was becoming slightly worried they were creating some type of not really but kind of his cult that was being called school-wide as the Izuku Fan Club. The first time he had heard of it from Minami, he felt like he could have died from shock as he nearly fainted, before quickly becoming embarrassed when she revealed with a cheeky smile that secretly made him feel warm inside, that she had also joined his fan club. At first, Izuku had tried to use all the tricks and leverage he could to stop the majority of the mutation-type students from seeing him as a hero even at the age of 8, which he could only see as bizarre, but Izuku had quickly come to realize that having the majority of the mutation-type student body worshipping him made it incredibly hard for Katsuki keep up his ways. It wasn't long after Izuku's fan club started publicly worshipping him at school that he noticed they would follow him and do everything they could to help him, and a little under a month after his fan club started, the school had received no less than 94 complaints from parents after hearing their children recite tales of Katsuki's less than model student actions and behavior. It didn't take long for Izuku to realize that all the parents complaining about Katsuki were parents of the members of Izuku's fan club. While practically every Aldera school went well out of their way to keep Katsuki's record clean, so many complaints could very well lead to public backlash at not only the school but also Katsuki. This resulted in a very tight leash being put on Katsuki's actions. While they still did underhanded things like making sure the complaints didn't make a mark on Katsuki's record and making sure he was the top academic student, Aldera had suddenly become a much easier place to go. It was also nice that so many respected him even though they believed he was quirkless. After the whole fan club debacle, Izuku had come to realize how much his hyper-intuition loved to throw him curveballs. At first, hyper-intuition had been incredibly passive and streamlined in helping him reach certain conclusions or helping him notice if someone's attention was on him, whether it ranged from good, neutral, or bad attention. But after Izuku's 9th birthday, while hyper-intuition still remained passive, it suddenly had a more active influence on him as a process not too dissimilar to someone with horrible eyesight putting on prescription glasses. Izuku suddenly became aware of things he had never been before, namely, he could sense and feel the quirks and emotions of the people around him. While many people who gained mental or emotional quirks usually had to deal with the fact that their brain had to adapt, so for people who gained quirks that allowed them to sense people's quirks usually had mood swings wilder than a drunkard, while people who had quirks that let them hear people's thoughts had to bear the pain of having so many voices in their heads. They would usually go into something similar to a vegetative stage with how much brainpower processing so many voices took. But the dividing factor between people like them and Izuku was that Izuku was born to have such a capability long before he turned 4. And the origins of his mother and father's quirks made the process of sensing emotions and feeling people's quirks a breeze for Izuku to near instantly adapt and understand everything he was processing. But just because he could instantly adapt to the sudden sensations did not mean that they didn't surprise him. Yelping from the shock, Izuku tumbled off of the chair he was sitting in as his mother instantly stopped taking pictures of her birthday boy to start worrying over him. "Izuku? What's wrong?" In a flash, Inko was by her son's side as she helped him up. As kindly as people saw Inko, only a few knew that a good part of Izuku's intelligence had more than likely come from his mother, so as Izuku pressed the heel of his palms to his eyes, Inko immediately became theorizing over what had happened. While she was a worrywart of a mother and was never one to fully trust anyone but her son and a few of her closest and oldest friends, Inko was fairly confident that the Watchers wouldn't let an unknown person get close enough to even think of harming her son, so an assassination or villain attack was out of the question. Suddenly a feeling of dread rose through her spine, and she only barely stopped the desperate need to squeak in terror at the possibility that he had found out. As quickly as the thought came, a new thought crossed her mind that was in equal measure better and worse than her previous thought. Looking at her son closely, Inko couldn't help the fear and dread that rose through her at the thought she had. While she realistically knew Izuku wasn't quirkless as he had a rare item quirk that he wasn't allowed to use at all times, she couldn't help but compare his condition to how one of her friends had looked when she developed a quirk when they were 4. The specific memory always stayed with Inko as it had been the first time she had seen someone develop a mental quirk. Admittedly, it was a mental quirk, but there was still that shock and surprise as they seemed to look at the world in a new and confusing light, and that same look was painted all over her son's face as he didn't seem to realize she holding him or had even asked him a question. Normally Inko would dismiss the thought as silly, but considering who his father was. Before Inko could fall any deeper into her thoughts, the front door was broken down as a squad of Watchers quickly ripped Izuku from her before she could even realize they had done it. They already were checking his condition before whisking him away, 2 members staying behind only long enough to escort Inko with them. With a wave from one of the members, her door was suddenly fixed before she and Izuku were stuffed into separate cars as they began to drive them to their HQ. As Inko stiffly answered their questions on if she had noticed if anything was off before Izuku collapsed, she only had one idea she dared tell no one. While the board is incredibly curious of how this phenomenon has somehow resulted in you exhibiting quirks like quirk and emotion sensing, the board is more than a little annoyed you kept such developments to yourself, so be prepared for that. Izuku shakily nodded as he watched the same apathetic doctor from before who diagnosed him with an item quirk calmly looking through the health papers on his clipboard, his tone monotone as though he wasn't describing Izuku's worst fear. "Anyway, after extensive retesting, we still cannot find a single trace of a standalone quirk inside of you. And your hyper-intuition is so incredibly hard to detect, so we can't tell if it's part of your item quirk or is a new evolution of quirks altogether. Regardless, we suspect the answer will appear as you mature." Izuku flinched at the mention of his hyper-intuition. He had tried as hard as possible to get past all the questions they had thrown at him, but then they pulled out the lie detection and truth-telling quirks to figure out what he wasn't telling them. His hyper-intuition had helped him with navigating the quirks, but after 9 hours of interrogation they finally pulled the reason for his collapse out of him. The revelation of his hyper-intuition had resulted in a flurry of questions and tests, but even after Izuku had been found out, he couldn't help but be a little disappointed that they weren't able to tell anything about his mysterious power that he didn't already know. Like Izuku predicted, security kept an even harder watch on him a few months after his and his mother's release from the Watchers HQ, but unexpectedly, after those few months passed, security lessened. The reason? The temporary increase in security was in case someone else noticed his new developments, but after nothing changed, the lessened security even more than before, as his hyper-intuition would be a better danger detection than them, so while a squad remained on standby in case Izuku detected danger, the monitoring watchers quickly disappeared, though they still warned him against using his quirk in public. He was allowed a little leniency when using it at home in moderation. Izuku had quickly become ecstatic to the new change, though the question on why they were giving him such leniency was because of his ability to detect danger and even hostility got rid of less of their workload, and while they were unsure if his hyper-intuition was connected to his quirk, if it was and that fell into someone else's hands, well, they preferred he could fight to protect himself if anything ever happened. Thump asterisk. Kachan. Racing to his bully's suffocating body in the viscous body of the villain's quirk. With no command or heed from his own mind, his ring began to shine a brilliant orange light. It would strike fear in the hearts of the ones the sky deems to not protect. Hundreds of feet in the air with nothing but his body filled with adrenaline, his quirk, and the trapped girl, he looked in the many red eye of his ire. The world slowed and came to a stop. The void appeared and red sun drew closer. All the while a stone on his ring cracked, showing the shining brightness of a gem the color of crimson blood. As the red sun drew nearer, the reason of his ire wold no devastation. A storm was brewing. Asterisk boom asterisk under the crumbled rubble, with a shatter filling the air, once more in the void, the red sun. No storm was upon him, and all would know it. 4 years later, it was the beginning homeroom. Besides Izuku being now the tallest person in the class for the last 2 years, and his training going to well, he had a black belt in Mara Krav and some other small hand fighting styles. Izuku expected today to be like every other day, but instead it would be another change on the level of La Brava appearing in his life. Okay class. We have an exchange student today. Okay. Come on in, Minata-san. Quietly the classroom door opened to reveal a girl who Izuku could only describe as Brava-chan with a different quirk. She was around the same height of La Brava with what looked to be purple balls on her head that looked to naturally form a pigtail similar to La Brava's own hairstyle. At the thought, Izuku chuckled in his head, knowing if he said that out loud Brava-chan would most likely hit him in the kidney again. Slowly the new girl walked into the middle of the front of the classroom. Minata-san, please introduce yourself. Looking to be nervous, the diminutive girl introduced herself. Hi everyone, my name is Minata M. Minori. Ending with only a slight stutter, she then bowed to everyone, which nearly everyone acknowledged with some varying nods. Now Minata-san, go sit in the empty seat next to Midoriya-san, the one with the green hair. Izuku suddenly realized why this was happening on the first day, which was only a month ago. He and La Brava had gone to sit in the back like always near the window, but a kid had already taken the widow's seat in the back, so he had sat in the seat next to the other random kid with Brava-chan on his right. But after the first day the random kid had just disappeared and never appeared afterward, and clearly the teacher was not going to clear up the why either to Izuku, just let it settle. The new girl's standing next to him. With a nervous lilt in her voice she greeted him, Hi. With a cheery smile Izuku greeted her back. Hi, my name is Izuku Midoriya. Oh. This is Brava-chan. Well, that's my nickname for her anyway. Hi. You can call me you can call me La Brava or Brava-chan. It's nice to see I'm not the only one this height anymore. At those words Minori looked around the green-haired boy, who surprisingly hadn't snickered once, and had shown to only be kind during their short introduction to one another, unlike what she was expecting, and saw a sight she also never expected. It was the girl who had called herself La Brava and was literally the same height as herself, even their hairstyles were the same. Sue, is pigtails like the universal hairstyle for girls who are short? Izuku quickly jabbed at his short pink-haired friend while facing her. Or did you just steal it? Izuku proceeded to say with a cheeky smile. Humph, like I would tell you. Just ignore the numbskull, he's let his quirk get to his head. La Brava jabbed back while talking to Minori. Snort, the only one who's let their quirk get to their head is Ka. Bakugo. Izuku quickly cut himself off before he said his nickname for his childhood and current bully. Confused Minori asked for clarification of who this Bakugo was. Who? Quickly Izuku glanced at the sea of students in the class before quickly lowering himself to her height next to her ear. See the one with sandy hair that's imitating an explosion and looks to have a permanent scowl on his face? Slowly looking at the sea of students and finally seeing who she believed he was talking about. Yay! His name is Katsuki Bakugo, his quirk is explosion, and has an ego the size of Mount Fuji. Impossibly larger, La Brava quickly cut in, and he's an asshole the size of one too. Snort asterisk. Brava-chan, calm down, and don't worry, we'll bring him down a peg once we get into UA. What? No way. You two are planning to go to UA too? Surprised, both Izuku and La Brava looked at Minori with surprise on both of their faces before Izuku quickly stated. You're going to UA? Yay. I'm going to the hero course. To find a man for myself, hehe. Wow, that's so cool. Me and Brava-chan are also going to try for the UA hero course as well, Izuku said with a large grin on his face while slightly shouting, but sadly, not quite enough. Huh, you still have that shitty fantasy of your Deku? Bakugo yelled at him from across the room. Your quirk-less ass and equally quirk-less girlfriend will never even get past the gate. You would both most likely die too, the first villain you two face in the first place. Bakugo started while slowly stalking the trio, but upon seeing the dimute form of Minori stalked off, most likely leaving them alone because he believed he had successfully scared off the new girl from ever interacting with them again. TT, that was so scary. Minori whisper shouted. Yeah, well, you get used to it, besides he can't do anything too bad with him being on a watch list and such. Izuku calmly stated. What watch list? Minori inquired. Well, firstly, me nor Brava-chan are quirk-less. We just don't like show off our quirks like a certain explosive Pomeranian. Secondly, because of what my quirk and Bakugo's quirk both are, there is a possibility of extensive damage to the school when we interact. Thirdly, before you ask, my quirk allows me to make a special flame, while Bakugo's quirk is what people believe to be self-explanatory is actually not, but his quirk is a combo of his parents' quirks, glycerin sweat and oxide pop, and when oxide oxidizes it sparks, and that spark lights the glycerin sweat that's on Bakugo's palms, but the glycerin sweat is everywhere on his body, not just his palms, so if I ever lit a flame around him, there is large possibility of him combusting and the school being wiped out from the resulting explosion. Well, that, and all of the student body either dying or being injured from it as well. Minori shuddered in fear of that ever happening, but something was more important to her at the moment. Sue, would you be willing to be my friends? Minori shyly asked both Izuku and La Brava. He and La Brava just looked at one another, then simultaneously looked at Minori and said, Sure. Minori was sure if it wasn't for the fact she was still in school she would have been shedding tears, so she decided to just hug them. Thank you both so much. I don't know why you're thanking me, but you're welcome. Hey, you need to come over to his house so you can taste his mom's cooking as a type of inauguration. Sure. Can we go there after school? Yay, his mom won't mind. After that, the school day quickly passed by, and as they met by the gate and started the trek to Izuku's house, Minori was in her own little world as she thought about her new friends, more specifically the green-haired boy known as Izuku Midoriya. Maybe I already found a man for myself, and as she thought about it, maybe a girl to share with him too, and that leads to the end of the day. Minori carved herself into Izuku's life. Things had changed drastically over the years because of the intervention of Minori now in both Izuku and La Brava's lives, so much so they now all three of them were in a relationship now. How? You may ask, simple. It was the day Izuku and Labrava were shown just how perverted Minori can get. 1.5 years earlier, Izuku was with both Labrava and Minori out at a local junkyard. But in reality it was a beach and for preparing for the future exams for Izuku started working on cleaning the beach off while Labrava and Minori do some working out with some of the junk and do some small sparring under his watchful eye. It happened just as they were about leave, after realizing that much like Labrava, Minori couldn't keep up with Izuku, so he had taken to picking up Labrava in his right and Minori in his left. Surprisingly, Minori, unlike Labrava, was never embarrassed and actually looked like she was queen of the world every time he did it. Izuku had been about to set off after picking them up when Minori started squirming. "Oi Izuku-kun, let me go. I want to try something." "Sure, Minori-chan." After Izuku did what she asked, she then proceeded to climb up his arm. As she reached his shoulder, she whipped around and sat on his shoulder. Looking slightly offended, Labrava proceeded to do the same on his right shoulder. Normally Izuku would not have much of a problem if it was not for one small fact. He could feel very vividly the shapes of their asses. Normally he wouldn't feel it, but since they were working out, they were wearing very form-fitting workout gear, which led to his current predicament. "Humph, why do you want to sit up here anyway?" Labrava asked, completely oblivious to Izuku's current predicament. Sadly or luckily for Izuku, Minori was not so oblivious to Izuku's current predicament. Grinning, Minori proceeded to tell Labrava her reasoning. "Easy," she started to say as she dug her ass more into Izuku's shoulder. "Don't these pants feel great, Izuku?" With that statement, leading to him getting even redder in the face, Labrava seemed to suddenly realize what's happening and why he's so red in the face. Minori, stop doing that. We need to get off him." Looking like she was contemplating this, Minori started. Nah, I think I like my ass right here, don't you too, Izuku?" she said with a lecherous grin before she suddenly got up. Labrava thought she was getting off but was quickly proven wrong when she then proceeded to put her hand in the back of her pants and seemed to pull something. As she finished, she then proceeded to get back on his shoulder, but straddling it, she then started to grind herself into his shoulder with a very red and perverted face. Izuku was still thoroughly embarrassed and looked like his brain fried, while Labrava was confused until she realized what Minori was doing. "Minori, quit doing that right now. And pull your panties back up already," surprisingly being caught with her panties literally down. Minori flushed even more red and let herself get dragged down by Labrava back on the ground, and just so happened to land right in front of Izuku. Labrava followed, pulling Minori down with plunging her hand into Minori's pants, and after finding the edge of Minori's panties, pulled them back up with an annoyed look on her face. She then slowly realized that she had just felt all of Minori's ass, right in front of Izuku too. This slowly led to her also being embarrassed. After some time passed with them all trying to get all their thoughts back in order, both Labrava and Minori looked to see if he was back from his mini breakdown as well, only for them both to stop when they noticed the large wet spot on his left shoulder. "Sue," Minori started, "would it be a bad time for me to say I want to date both of you?" As though those were the magic words, Izuku slowly came back from his small breakdown from embarrassment and looked at Minori. After looking at her for a bit, he turned to Labrava, but he found her already climbing her way up him till she was eye level with him. Then she proceeded to kiss him. Slowly pulling away, she turned to Minori and motioned her to come up. After she did, now on the right shoulder again, they all kissed one another slowly. "So does this mean we're dating?" Izuku asked. Labrava and Minori just looked at one another and back and simply said, "Yes." Since that day they had gotten closer, so much so that when Izuku's mom found out, she offered them their guest room for them to move into, since they basically live here anyway. They still only sleep with him in his room though. The start of the day was like every other day, nearly, waking up late with the two other girls on random places on his body and hooked on like koalas, him getting them out only to have to turn around to stop Minori from peeking on him, and then leading to him getting ready. While eating the breakfast his mom made him while waiting for the girls to get ready, then they leave for school. Izuku then remembered today as the start of their new school year, also the last year before they try to get into UA. "Okay kids, time to fill your forms for what school you want to go to in the future. the teacher announced to the half-asleep class. But who am I kidding? You all want to be heroes. At that announcement the kids suddenly seemed to rise and starting using their quirks at reckless abandon. Okay students, calm down. Now take out your forum sheets and turn them in. Slowly but surely all students turned their forms in, but what caught the teacher's attention was that realistically he did not expect anyone to actually put a hero school for their future school, but he saw 4 individual students wanting to go to a hero school, in fact the very same hero school UA, and the one that really caught his eye is one those forums with UA on it was Katsuki Bakugo. The teacher was about to announce this when a glint caught his eye as he looked up and saw Izuku Midoriya, another student that put UA, or more specifically the ring, or what the teacher knew better as his quirk. While the whole student body did not believe Midoriya to not have a quirk, the teacher faculty knew better. The faculty had questioned why both Midoriya and Bakugo were on the watch list and got a breakdown of Bakugo's quirk and a recording of Midoriya's quirk that involved him at the age of 4 engulfing a whole room that was as big as the school in flames. So after seeing the menacing glint in Midoriya's eye that was screaming at him to dare say anything about the forums, he just put his head back down and told the class to get their textbooks out. After school, as Izuku started packing, he told Minori and Brava-chan to go on ahead, not realizing Bakugo was watching and waiting. So after the whole room had cleared out besides Izuku, who was still packing, and Bakugo and his cronies, he approached. "Hey Deku." Startled at being called out, Midoriya quickly looked up and then just as quickly, if a small bit slower, slumped when he saw it was just himself and Bakugo and his cronies left. He already knew what to expect. "Yes, Bakugo," Midoriya said calmly and slowly, already done with whatever Bakugo wanted with him. Originally Bakugo was going to grab one of the useless Deku's books, but he for some reason has not brought them today. Oh well, I'll just make him give up and move on. "You are planning to still be a hero, aren't you, Deku? So what if I am Bakugo?" The sentence quickly enraged Bakugo more, resulting in him having an insane smile while putting his hand on Deku's shoulder, planning on making shitty Deku listen. "Well, let me make this clear," Bakugo said slowly as his palm started to get hotter and hotter, burning the cloth over Deku's shoulder, not knowing that the heat was doing absolutely nothing, since Izuku had grown a complete resistance to heat since he got his quirk. "I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and every great hero has an origin story, and I plan on mine being spotless of useless trash like you, so get it through your head that you will never be a hero, and your shitty girlfriends too." Bakugo finished, not knowing how correct he was with the last 2 words at the end of his statement. "Leave me alone, Bakugo," Izuku stated lowly. "You think you can tell me what to do, Deku? How about this? Take a swan dive off the roof and hope you get a quirk next time," he then added as an afterthought, "and your useless girlfriends too." As Bakugo prepared to walk away, he felt himself lock up and feel like ice was traveling in his veins. What the hell is this? Bakugo screamed in his head. It was fear. "Bakugo," Izuku stated slowly as he started speaking. "I don't give a damn what you say or do to me, but never say that about them too, Aegean," finishing with a menacing growl. "Am I clear?" "Tch whatever, shitty Deku." Bakugo finally was able to get as far away as he could, to escape ever feeling whatever that feeling, fear, was again. Slowly after Izuku had gotten out of the school, after messaging Brava-chan and Minori, he decided to take a bit of a walk so he didn't use his quirk, especially when Bakugo was around. Slowly time passed and he came to an underpass, but for the first in a while his instincts blared at him, warning him to be cautious and wait. So that's exactly what he did. Not that he had to wait long, as of 20 seconds later the sewer lid that was inside the underpass was blown upward with force and suddenly a ghastly looking sludge appeared. It seemed to be a mix of lime and dark green, creating a disgusting look mixed with its viscous appearance. It seemed to mumble to itself about finding a invisibility cloak, and seemed to be in a hurry, but suddenly it seemed to spot Izuku and lunged for him. But this was quickly deterred, as with simply a thought the ring on his finger engulfed his body, forcing the slime to make a hasty retreat. A large-sized invisibility cloak. Just what the doctor ordered to get rid of that pesky hero. With that statement it lunged once more at Izuku and spread its body, intent on smothering the flames around Izuku's body. But the sludge would soon learn this was a mistake, for as it believed it was successful in smothering the flames, they came back but pure orange, and the sludge man then realized the sludge that encased the boy was turning to stone. But alas for the sludge villain, it was too late, and nearly all but the slime around its eyes and organs were turned to stone and was quickly contained in a ring of flames so that it couldn't escape, otherwise risk turning the rest of its body to stone in the process. This all had happened in seconds, and for Izuku that was enough time to secure the villain, but it also enough time for a certain hero to make his appearance. "I am here." With that colossal shout, a large shadow fell over Izuku and the contained sludge villain. Suddenly the sludge villain screamed in disgust. "All Might!" Gasping in surprise, Izuku quickly turned around to find that the sludge villain was right, it was All Might. All Might! Izuku yelled in nerd-like surprise and glee, while yes, his girlfriends had helped in him getting over his obvious obsession in heroes. All Might is still All Might. Ha ha! Yes, it is I, All Might. All Might yelled in his loud, boisterous voice. "And thank you, citizen, for catching this slippery villain, and I'm dearly sorry you got caught up in my harrowing," All Might proceeded to say in what sounded like genuine sorrow. It's fine, All Might SS sir. Besides, the villain wasn't even able to hurt me before I caught it." As Izuku finished his statement, as he gestured to the rest of the villain that was stuck in the circle of flame. All Might then noticed that the circle of flame indeed contained what was left of the villain, but that left one question. "You say, the rest of the villain. But where exactly are the other parts? It seems to be able to manipulate the sludge even when it's disconnected from its body." "Oh, that's simple. My flame is special, so I can, instead of burning, I can stonify something with my flames. So where's the rest? Simple. I use the stonification aspect of my flame to stonify everything but the organs of the villain, and then raised my flame's temperature till it burned the stone to cinders." All Might was blown back by the amount of ease that the boy was able to use such a dangerous-sounding quirk, and he was confident anyone else would have most likely freaked out and flat-out stonified the whole villain's body instead of just the extra sludge. "Well then, an amazing jobber," All Might trailed off awkwardly. "Izuku Midoriya," Izuku stated simply. "Ah yes, well, amazing job, young Midoriya. Now I'll deal with the rest of this villain." Following his declaration, in a burst of wind, Midoriya's fire was instantly put out and the sludge villain was contained in a plastic bottle. "Wow, he put my fire out so easily," Izuku thought to himself. "Oh, All Might. See, can I have your autograph?" Izuku said quickly, stopping All Might while pulling out a notebook that he had hidden before Bakugo could see it earlier. All Might turned around and said, "Certainly, young Midoriya." All Might proceeded to take the notebook Midoriya was offering to him and went to an empty page and signed his name over 2 whole pages, and then seemed to write something before handing it back to Izuku. "Well then, I'll be off. This villain isn't going to turn himself in." All Might quickly jumped away, not noticing a certain bottle slipping from his pocket just as he went over an open water tank a worker was working on. Back with Izuku. After watching All Might jumping away, Izuku quickly looked at the page All Might had signed, then he noticed smaller writing underneath All Might's signature. "I am sure you will be a fine hero someday." Izuku felt like he was in heaven. His idol said he would be a great hero. Suddenly Izuku was brought back to the land of the living when a large explosion went off not too far away from him. Worried, he quickly ran over to where the explosion went off at. Izuku didn't know what to expect when he got to the scene, but it was not the heroes standing around making excuses, saying something about a water tower making the sludge villain stronger, and when he finally saw what was happening, his heart stopped. He saw Bakugo fighting the same villain he had caught not too long ago. Not only that, there was a kid in Bakugo's arms as he tried to get the kid away while at the same time fighting the sludge villain off, when suddenly he heard the sludge villain speak. "Fine, if I can't take you, I'll just kill you and take the brat." At that statement, Bakugo did something he never expected. As the sludge villain rose and mowed a spear of solid sludge, Bakugo suddenly looked resigned to his fate, and right before the spear hit him, threw the child at the pro heroes, which they caught. And just as he threw the child, the sludge spear speared through Bakugo's heart. The world slowed down for Izuku, for he was in shock at what he saw, but was quickly pulled out of his trance by the dull thump of Bakugo's body hitting the ground as the sludge villain attempted to use Bakugo's slowly dying body by finishing the job by suffocating him, then taking over his body so the sludge villain could use Bakugo's dead body's quirk to escape. Kachan. Izuku shouted the first thing that came to mind as he began running to the suffocating body of his ex-childhood friend, now bully. With no heed from his mind, his ring began to shine a brilliant orange light, and, as he almost reached the sludge villain, the light from his ring turned into flame that quickly engulfed his body, but not like before. This was different. The flames around his body almost looked like threads, and a pure orange flame burst around his hands and head. Luckily, this caught the sludge villain's attention. I'll kill you before you can ruin anything else. The sludge villain screamed as it used some of its body to make an exact duplicate of the spear that stabbed Bakugo, and as the sludge villain stabbed it towards Izuku, the flames suddenly burst and disintegrated the sludge spear, as well as blinding everyone with its bright light. As the bright light died down, everyone was shown a sight that surprised them. It was Izuku, but he had his gloves on as well as a fitting dress suit, as well as a part of his flame coming from his head. But that's all the crowd and heroes saw. But the sludge villain could see something they could not, and along with all his sudden additions glaring at the villain were piercing orange eyes that looked cold and neutral but seemed to hold something terrifying back behind those eyes. Die. Quickly the villain tried to do what he did earlier, but this was less effective than the last time, for just as the spear was about to hit Izuku, the gloves burst into flames and he disappeared in the blink of an eye. The sludge villain quickly tried to find Izuku again, but it was already too late, for just as the sludge villain saw Izuku proceeded to blast a giant jet of flame that not only blew the villain back, but much like last time, nearly all of its excess sludge was disintegrated, but miraculously did not burn a hair on Bakugo's head. Slowly Izuku began to speak at a low tone that only the villain was able to hear it. Feel fear run through you, for the sky has no mercy for the ones who defy it. At those words the sludge villain fainted. Slowly, Izuku walked towards Bakugo's body, and as Izuku got to Bakugo's body and saw the blank dead stare only a corpse could give, and slowly shed a tear at the knowledge he could not save him, not knowing. The last thing Bakugo heard was Izuku call him by his old childhood name. The last thing he saw was Izuku blast the sludge villain with a jet of flame, and his last thought was, "You will make a great hero someday, Izuku, and I guess your shitty girlfriends too." 2 hours later, after the whole squabble was done, apparently Izuku's suit had burst into flame and disappeared, as well as the gloves, leaving him in what he had on earlier. And his memory was foggy over the whole thing. Fight, if you could call it that, after the burst of light, and after being thanked for dealing with the villain, before it could defile Bakugo's body any further, and then scolded for illegal quirk use and getting involved, but let it slide for both what he stopped, and he had no prior offenses when it came to quirk use, unlike other kids his age that usually have 1 or 2 warnings over quirk use, and was let go to be able to go home. Soon he got home, and as he closed the apartment door and turned around, and was tackled by both Brava-chan and Minori, one on each leg, his mom approached, looking like she had been crying heavily and looked ready to start crying again, and grabbed his torso and pulled him into a bone-crushing hug only a worried mother was able to hug with. She then proceeded to speak. "Oh my little Izuku, I was so worried about you, and I could only stay here to make sure you're okay. But I've got to go to the Bakugos to see how they're handling Katsuki's death. I'll be leaving you with these two, and told them to make sure you learn your lesson about not worrying. It's like this again." After one more heartfelt hug, Izuku's mom left for the Bakugos. Minori was home alone. Inko apparently had to deal with an extremely important client today, so she would be getting home late, and both Izuku and La Brava were at school. Now why wasn't she at school too? She had a wet dream and had woken up flushed in the face, and couldn't get her mind off the wet dream, and they all overreacted and thought she had a fever and made her stay home. Now how could a wet dream have such an impact on Minori that she couldn't stop thinking about it? Well, here it is. Minori was laying down, striped down to her favorite purple panties as La Brava laid atop her, she in her favorite pink panties, their chests rubbing against one another as they sloppily kissed with their tongues down each other's throats. Slowly La Brava pulled out of the sloppy kiss and started a trail of kisses down Minori. Starting at Minori's cheek, then her neck, and then Labrava made her way down to Minori's small breasts and alluringly looked up at Minori for permission. After Minori nodded, Labrava wasted no time and started ravaging Minori's chest and then proceeded to bite and suck on Minori's nipples. As this happened, Minori was in bliss as her panty-clad pussy started growing damp. Quickly Labrava started her track down once more, leaving a trail of kisses along the way until she got to her prize. Slowly she delicately kissed Minori's pussy and Minori nearly came from the sensation right then and there. Then Labrava stopped and got up. Once she did that, she went past Minori and went behind her. The whole time Minori was wondering what she was doing. She soon got her answer. Suddenly Labrava dropped and now her head was positioned at Minori's panty-clad pussy, but as a result Minori's head was in between Labrava's thighs. Minori quickly got the message, and as she leaned up to start lapping and kissing the dripping wet pink panty-clad pussy, Labrava soon followed and began kissing around Minori's folds, but soon began lapping at the growing damp spot on Minori's panties. Driven by lust, Minori soon felt her arms rise up and grab as much of Labrava's ass as possible, but soon Minori got idea. Grinning lecherously, she straightened out as much as she could so she could see higher up Labrava's ass and then gripped the waistband of Labrava's panties, but soon stopped as she had lowered it about 2 inches down. She then began to reach up, but then hissed and stopped for a moment as Labrava had found and started sucking on Minori's love button under her panties that were now practically ruined. But soon the moment passed and she soon had both of her hands gripping on Labrava's smooth, supple, small ass and then proceeded to pry open Labrava's ass cheeks as her fingers dug into Labrava's ass. Labrava suddenly whipped her own arms up to her head and gripped Minori's ass, and they in sync moaned at feeling their asses fondled. Soon after, Minori was able to focus and locked on to her target. Labrava's winking asshole. At seeing it, Minori gripped Labrava's ass tighter and pulled it down. Once her ass was just over her head, she hooked her finger into Labrava's waistband and pulled until all of Labrava's ass and her love button were visible. After that she stopped pulling right before it revealed all of Labrava's pussy, leaving it clad in its pink panties. Then began to lick every inch of Labrava's ass. Once every inch of Labrava's ass was covered in her saliva, she then stuck her tongue out and put it right where Labrava's pussy began. Then slowly dragged her tongue up the panty-clad pussy, right over Labrava's love button, then all the way up to Labrava's asshole, where she then stopped and kept doing it until she felt something strange. It was Labrava prodding Minori's asshole through her panties. Then suddenly, in one swift motion, Labrava shoved her whole middle finger into Minori's asshole while also stretching the panties. As this happened, Minori shoved her tongue into Labrava's asshole, resulting in them both coming in sync. Suddenly Minori woke up after coming in her dream, and after pulling down her covers and raising her shirt, that she had stolen from Izuku, found her panties damp. After everyone had left, Minori had tried to sleep, but she still couldn't. Then she suddenly had idea that would get her one step closer to having real sex. Minori felt frisky, so as she walked to her closet. The room she shares with Labrava has 2 closets. She had a prominent swing in her hips that made her panty-clad ass tantalizingly appear from under the dress-like shirt when her hips popped. Now for why she's going to her closet. As she got to her closet and opened it, she went to the back and got a full body mirror and brought it out, and then a box that was right next to the mirror. After sitting the box next to the mirror, she opened the box, revealing even more mirrors of varying shapes and sizes. Suddenly Minori jumped from the waist up into the box, so her lower half was hanging out. It could have been described as cute if it wasn't for the fact the action had caused her shirt to raise and showed off her panties that tightly clung to her ass, showing its full form and hiding nothing but her smooth and clean pussy and asshole that lie beneath. It also revealed that she had not changed her panties, since the action revealed the exact pair of purple panties she went to bed in and came in while masturbating multiple times, for the damp spot was still there. Suddenly Minori slid out of the box with multiple items in hand. Cradled in her right arm was a butt plug-shaped mirror, a dildo-shaped mirror, and a tablet-shaped mirror, and clenched in her left hand was a marker that said, Smart M Marker, with a silver cap, and an identical pair of purple panties to what she was wearing. Suddenly she bent over and placed all the mirror-themed stuff on the ground, but kept the panties in her hand. As she raised back up, she spread the panties out, then proceeded to hold the top on one side, letting it hang loosely open on the other, where she then placed her finger on the crotch and then pushed. Surprisingly, instead of the panties ripening at 1 or 2 inches while Beng stretched, it kept stretching until nearly Minori's whole arm was inside the stretchy material. What was more surprising was that the panties seemed to keep their form and not try to stretch along with another stretched area. Shortly, Minori brought her hand back and stopped stretching the panties and went back to the box, this time bringing out identical shirt to the one she was wearing as well, and a handheld mirror. Minori then stripped off her shirt and panties, revealing the smoothness of her pussy and hairlessness of any spot on her body, as well as her underdeveloped but still budded chest and slightly perky nipples. In a sudden surge of lust, Minori bent over the box and spread her legs side as she saw in the mirror how her pussy juices from earlier dribbled out from her pussy, making strands in the air before becoming too heavy and falling, only to be caught by Minori's fingers as she then sensually licked her fingers clean of her own juices. After, Minori then put on the identicals of her earlier clothing. Then she picked up the marker from earlier and then got the handheld mirror, uncapped the marker and started writing on the handheld mirror. After she was done, it showed the word shrink. Suddenly the handheld mirror glowed as it reflected the shirt she was wearing, when suddenly the very shirt she was wearing shrunk. How did this happen exactly? Well, here's the explanation. Story time. A year ago, an unknown company that used quirks to affect their products released a product called smart mirrors. These mirrors came with a marker that you used to write on the mirror to give it instructions. It was basically a touch phone but in a form of a mirror and none of the internet access. But these mirrors were highly popular to social media selfie addicts that wanted to take pictures in mirrors, but their phones ruined it. But the smart mirrors, you could just write remove blank and suddenly you couldn't see what was removed from the mirror but still see everything that was happening behind the removed object. And it was all the craze for selfie people. Then suddenly it was released that there was update where the mirrors could take pictures and even record and be able to record everything being seen in the mirror's view and then be sent to another mirror it was connected to be able to send the special mirror pictures and recordings. And a little bit after, there were customizable mirrors that could be used for clothing, and then adult section appeared with adult toys that were also customizable, and that's when Minori started buying the stuff and she bought lots. Sadly, there was a scandal and it was released that a pervert had figured out that he could set up the mirrors in changing rooms and record them. Soon after, all mirrors were checked from then on. But then the true tragedy struck. A group of blackmailing villains had set up shops all over a district and had smart mirrors as their windows, but had just made the mirrors see-through, and no one realized, of course, that was not the tragedy. The tragedy was that the villains had learned they just need to write remove female clothing and record permanently. And then years later, dozens of women were being blackmailed by naked recordings and pictures of them. That was the last straw, and the company recalled as many smart mirrors as possible before publicly breaking tons of them and then disappearing. But Minori had been able to keep hers since they could hide in plain sight, and her mother never knew about her buying the mirrors and had kept them to this day, and suddenly she found a use for them. Back to the FIC. And so when the shirt shrunk, it shrunk so much so it perfectly outlined her breasts and erect nipples and clung to the rest of her torso tightly as well. Then she sat the handheld mirror down, revealing her panty-clad ass in all its tight glory, then went to the full body mirror, tilted it on its side so it was horizontal, went to the box and got out a disposable futon, rolled it out in front of the mirror, got the mirror butt plug and dildo, sat the butt plug down, then went to the mirror and wrote record in 15 seconds until stop. Then as the mirror counted down, she wrote the same thing down on the mirror dildo and then proceeded to lay down. As the mirror started recording, Minori first started by grabbing her breasts and fondling them, and then moved on to pinching them and pulling on them, all the while having a lustful look on her face as she looked directly into the mirror. While this was happening, her panties slowly started growing a wet spot. After she noticed just how wet she had become, she stopped fondling herself and reached down to grab the waistband of her panties, where she then pulled hard, resulting in digging her panties into her crotch and giving herself a very naughty camel toe. Then she picked up the mirror dildo and without moving her panties proceeded to plunge it into pussy, where she then started moaning loudly in lust. The mirror dildo was 5 inches long but 3 inches thick, so as it slid into her there was a visible bulge of where the dildo was, slowly gaining speed. Minori continued to rapidly pull the dildo out of her just to rapidly plunge it back in. As she did this, her tongue slowly fell from her mouth as she fell deeper into pleasure. As time went on, Minori suddenly pulled the dildo completely out of her, then made a show of turning around with her face on the ground, still facing the mirror, while the bottom half of her was on her folded knees with her ass in the air. Seductively, Minori reached to her dildo and proceeded to make a show of sucking the tip before taking a deep breath and taking it fully in her throat, where she pumped it in her mouth a few times before sensually taking it back out and kissing the tip. Then she winked to the mirror as she reached to her ass with the dildo still in hand, and then spread her kneeling knees further, widening the view of her ass while giving herself a camel toe one more, and proceeded to slowly shove the dildo into her asshole, all the while still wearing the panties. Slowly and methodically she pulled the dildo out, and just as the tip was about to come out, shoved it back in full force, making the little ass she had wiggle. Suddenly, the bulge she had widened, and as though deep in lust from the sudden change, she sped up herself fucking, and suddenly her legs stopped knelling and raised to the ends of her toes, all the while her face on the ground and her pumping the dildo in and out of her ass so fast it was a blur before suddenly she came hard. The mirror fabric that was over her crotch was already soaked, but suddenly she moaned loudly and jammed the dildo into her ass as far and as deeply as she could, as a shower of her cum came raining down from her raised pussy. Then her legs gave out and she ended up collapsing onto the puddle of her own pussy juices. Though she couldn't bring herself to care before slowly pulling the dildo out of her, to only reveal that the mirror dildo had indeed expanded about an inch in length and girth. Then slowly put it down before grabbing both the marker and butt plug. Wrote live recording on the butt plug, and then moved her panties to the side to reveal her gaping asshole to the mirror, but her asshole was quickly plugged by the butt plug, causing her to moan once more, before getting up on wobbly legs and walked to the mirror and slowly wrote stop, but just before she wrote P at the end, she quickly ripped her shirt upward from the hem to briefly reveal her budding breasts and erect nipples that shimmered in the light from the sheen of sweat on her chest. After she recovered fully, she put everything away. Well, everything but three things: the mirror marker, the mirror butt plug, and finally the mirror phone tablet. When Izuku got home, he was not expecting Minori to bounce to him with a mania folder in her hand and then hand it to him. When he asked what was in it, she just winked and said, "Don't open it until tonight." So being who he is, Izuku, despite wanting to open it, immediately waited. So when it was time for bed, and after getting ready, went to the mania folder and opened it to have a shock of his life. Sliding from it was what he recognized as a smart mirror phone and a Ziploc bag, and when picking it up he also recognized what was in the bag: Minori's panties that looked damp. Izuku was about to put it all back when he saw a note: "Start the recording on the smart mirror and take out the panties. You're going to need them. You don't want to hurt my feeling, do you?" With that statement he did just as she asked, and was introduced to some surprising things that night. He also realized Minori was right. He did need her panties. Early in the morning, the only person awake was Minori. She quickly got up and walked to the mirror she had decided to leave out the full body one, and wrote upon picture, "Remove female clothing," and then wrote "Take picture in 5 seconds." In that time, she turned her back to the mirror and grabbed her ass cheeks and pulled them apart while slightly bending over and to the side, slightly showing an edging of the curve of her breast and slight poking out of her nipple, and revealed to the mirror her panties stretching as she spread her ass. But as the picture was taken, it revealed her naked form of her backside with the slight tilt of her body just barely showing the tip of her erect nipple and the curve of her budding breasts, and the mirror butt plug still in her asshole. After taking the picture, she brought out her own smart mirror phone, and as she walked to Izuku's door, sent the picture she took, and then walked into Izuku's room, and after a bit of searching found her, now sperm-drenched, panties under his bed. Minori then pulled down her current pair of panties that were already growing a damp spot at the crotch, but as she did this she caught her reflection in the mirror he had in his room and shuddered in lust as she looked over, just in time see a string of her juices pool out from underneath the shirt and onto her panties. Snapping herself out of it, she then slowly, and having to hold back many moans, pulled the butt plug out, then took the sperm-soaked panties and wrapped and looped it around her butt plug, and then starting a recording on her smart mirror phone showed the butt plug wrapped in the sperm-soaked panties and showed a close-up as she shoved it back into her asshole, panties and all, and then proceeded to send that recording to Izuku's own smart mirror phone. 10 months had flown by for the trio from Izuku, having cleared the beach and training with the new flame suit, as both La Brava and Minori call it, though Izuku feels partial to calling Vangola's suit, because the name had always had a certain ring to him, and him deciding he wanted his hero name to be Vangola, it sounded better than flame suit, making him sound like a rip-off endeavor. Then there was Brava-chan, who over the 10 months, after a long hard-fought battle that Izuku won in convincing her to try using her tech skills to get into UA through the hero course, was perfecting her hacking skills, and finally Minori, who while Izuku had been pushing her in learning how to traverse using her quirk every time she shows up to train, she's in a skirt and constantly reminding him of her ahem activity, with a certain plug still in place, but luckily he has been able to at least get her to train so that she can learn how to use her small body to her advantage along with Brava-chan, though Minori only really joins because every time one of us ends up in a compromising position, besides all that it was time for the UA entrance exam. You two ready? Yep. La Brava said excitedly. Minori said dejectedly, dreading the upcoming exam, while yes, she wanted to become a hero. She knew that her quirk was much like her counterpart's quirk, a support quirk, that while yes in terms of use was usefulness, there could be made several counter-arguments to the uses of their individual support quirks, but a support quirk was still a support quirk, and she believed wholeheartedly that only people with flashy quirks like Izuku could really pass, but she was going to try anyway. Okay then. Let's go. Leading up with that statement, Izuku then proceeded to pick them up and put them on their respective shoulders and set off for the exam. Moments later, here they were, the gates of UA, the hero school, the alumni for multiple heroes such as All Might himself and others like Endeavor, but that wasn't important right now. They were there to take the exam, to take their places in this very school. Stepping through the gates, La Brava and Minori both instantly noticed they caught lots of people's attention. One being a small girl with her bangs hanging over her eyes that was the same height as both La Brava and Minori, or more specifically Izuku, caught their attention, but they weren't surprised. After all, no one expects so see a tall kid with not that all defining features with a beautiful ring on his finger and 2 plush-sized girls on his shoulders, but of course none of them were affected by the attention. After all, they had traveled like this for years. As they got to the reception desk, the receptionist looked up and breathed in to speak, but hesitated upon seeing both Izuku and the 2 girls on his shoulders, but quickly shook her surprise off. Hello, how may I help you? 3 today. With slight hesitation at the end, the receptionist was able to pull off, looking unaffected by the strange position the 3 were in. Oh, Izuku began. We're all here for the hero course, don't worry, we're all from the same school, Aldera Junior High. My name's Izuku Midoriya. Gesturing to his right. Her name's I'm pretty sure it's under the alias La Brava. Then gesturing to his left. And her name's Minori Minata. After taking note of the school and their names and then checking that their profile pictures were exactly said. Well, all 3 of you are registered, so please take these slips and head to the left and take a right into the first door you see. Fishing out 3 slips, she handed them a slip individually before pointing where they needed to go. Thank you, have a nice day. The trio bid the receptionist bye in sync. After going into the correct door that led to a large auditorium, Izuku began looking for his seat, not bothering to look for the 2 girls' seats, knowing they will remain sat on him anyway. Partway through, looking all the while turning some heads, including a certain frog and punk girls, as well as starting some whispering between the students, a UA staff member suddenly approached them. Izuku was prepared to explain why the 2 girls were sat on him when the undescribed staff member just silently handed him a sheet of paper, bowed and then walked away. Slightly confused but also hopeful that he was correct on what he thought the paper was, he unfolded it and his face immediately broke into a hopeful grin. Quickly finding his seat, he began to read what was handed to him. Under the pretense and registration of Izuku Midoriya and 2 other students with support quirks, Minori Minata and Aluz La Brava have been accepted as 2 support role students to Izuku Midoriya, where the 2 may stay with this student and be support roles to this student during the duration of the physical exam. Upon the completion of getting a total of at minimum 60 points precedes the passing of all 3 future students. Izuku and the girls were over the moon. They had been accepted as a team, of sorts. Let's set some context. One day both of the girls had approached Izuku about their worries over them both having support quirks and not being able to pass and then being behind the rest when they try to make it from the Gen Ed course into the Hero course. Of course Izuku took their worries to heart and began researching everything he could to help quell their fears. He soon found the solution. After a time he had found a small quote from Nedzu, the principal of UA, that while it's not stated in the handbook, there is a possibility that a student may be able to register as a leader for a team that had support quirks that would be believed to work well together. After finding this, Izuku immediately told the two girls about it, so after some calls and signing some paperwork it was passed into UA to ask for permission. Of course they had not heard anything about it for a long time and had lost hope and that they were denied. After finding out that the paper accepted them as a team, they had blanked out, only catching there was some kind of arena trap called the 0-pointer. And quickly him and the girls went and got changed and met up at the bus that was taking them to their exam areas. After getting on they quickly started planning how they were going to tackle the test when they began. Soon the bus stopped and escorted everyone off to reveal a large faux city. "Wow," Minori exclaimed. "How does UA have the time or money to build this?" "Well," Izuku began, "one of the registered heroes on the staff has a quirk that allows them to control cement, and when I researched him I found he had architecture and civil engineering degrees. Now for the money? All might came from this school, so probably from sponsors and donations from top-ranking heroes that came from this school." Izuku rambled on but at least answered the core questions Minori asked. But his rambling was soon interrupted by Labrava lightly hitting him on the head and pointing at present Mike, saying, "It looks like he's taking a really deep breath." Just as soon as she said that, the gates to the city opened. Pushed by his instincts, Izuku immediately ran into the faux city, leaving everyone behind. Just as soon as he passed the gate he heard the earth-rattling yell of "Start!" behind him from present Mike, but just as quickly jumped and activated his gloves. Knowing that the exam was only 10 minutes and he had stretched his time limit with his gloves to an hour, so it was plenty in his time limit, and rocketed deeper in the city with the two girls hanging on. Soon he made it to where they would start their plan, the heart of the faux city. Quickly landing, Izuku then felt a gentle kiss on his cheek, signifying Labrava had used her quirk on him, and then ramped up his flame to the hard flame instead of the soft flame, and proceeded to blast a blinding amount of flame into the sky, using it to attract the bot. Why did he know this would work? Simple. Labrava had managed to hack into UA and glean some info about the bots, and one thing she learned is that the bots were supposed to act like villains that were attracted to sound and light, so blasting that fire should have attracted a large amount of bots. Quickly going on to the next part of the plan, he squatted down and put his flat of the palm on the ground and waited. As he waited, Labrava used her quirk on Minori. Soon Minori was throwing the balls of her quirk around the area in preparation for the robots to appear, but as the purple balls landed on the ground they exploded into a sticky-looking purple substance. How? Because of Izuku pushing Labrava to use her quirk, they found that while it had no effect on his own quirk, she is able to use her quirk to evolve a quirk temporarily instead of just making the person and their quirk stronger. It also allowed her to push how many times she was able to use her quirk. Soon robots started appearing, but soon got stuck in the Minori's quirk. As soon as the robots started trying to get over one another, Izuku started the final step in his plan. Making sure the girls were hanging on him tightly, he activated harmony. In a blaze of flame, the whole heart of the faux city was turned to stone instantly, including every single robot that had been coming or was trying to reach them. Quickly jetting off again, this time further into the city. He wasn't worried of people getting hit by harmony. After all, who sees a giant flame pillar in the sky and goes, "Let me just go over to the obviously dangerous place"? Needless to say, he wasn't worried. Suddenly, on his way deeper into the city, Minori dropping sticky bombs at robots she saw along the way. He saw, it was moving the ground that much, and heard a loud rumbling sound coming from the ground. Quickly directing his hands to stay afloat in the air, he saw a giant green robot suddenly raised to eye level with him some distance away, and watched as it started moving towards the horde of students that were in front of it as they were all running away. Worried, He jetted in front of the robot and then some and let the girls off and told them, "Find and help as many people who are in the path of the zero-pointer. I am going to try and deal with it." Quickly the two girls nodded and ran as fast as they could towards the gate looking for students that were possibly in trouble. Watching as they ran for a moment, Izuku quickly turned around and jetted off to face the zero-pointer head-on. As he closed in, he stayed at ground level hoping to avoid it till the last possible moment, but that hope was ruined when suddenly heard a cry. "Help!" Looking around quickly, he found a short girl with bangs hanging in front of her eyes still calling for help as she tried, and failed, to pull her lower body from the rubble and seemed to be trying to use her quirk, as it would explain the sudden drowsiness in the girl's posture and seemed even weaker and small. Little mushrooms popped up around her bottom half, but was too exhausted to do anything. Acting quickly, Izuku, in a blur of speed only comparable by All Might or a teleporter, appeared in front of the many red-eyed robot, his face slightly contorted in slight anger at a hero's exam not stopping the robot about to crush the girl that was stuck, knowing that Harmony and his soft flame would be no help. Instantly kicked into top gear and began blasting the robot head-on. Seeing as it wasn't slowing the robot down, decided to pull out his ace in the hole. In a sudden blur of speed, but this one slightly wild, Izuku appeared above the robot, his body horizontal to the robot almost looking like he was laying down, and spread his arms, his left arm in front of him and his right arm behind him. Quickly his right glove started heating up before a giant cone of his soft flame appeared from his palm, but just before the cone of soft flame appeared, his right glove heated up but looked to be even hotter, and just as the cone of soft flame behind him was about to shove him forward, a cone of his hard flame that looked less controlled and even brighter and hotter than his cone of soft flames, it seemed to spear out and engulfed the whole upper body of the robot. As this happened, the robot stopped, but soon just slower, the robot began its track forward once more, going deeper in himself, angered at the possibility of him being too late for someone else. Suddenly the world slowed and became monochrome, but Izuku was unaware, eyes closed and concentrating on reaching deep and stopping the zero-pointer, didn't notice that one of the onyx-colored suns began to draw closer to him. As it got closer, one of the onyx-colored stones on Izuku's ring began to crack and emit a shining color that was blood red. As though the crack in the stone was what Izuku was searching for, he pushed harder, not noticing that the flames in front of him took a small red thing similar to the color that was emitting from the crack, and all at once, the robot stopped, and the world stopped being monochrome. Finally Izuku opened his eyes, feeling that he had succeeded and stopped emitting his flames. Unknown to Izuku, the flames had stopped being tinged with red as the monochrome color of the world vanished from Izuku's perspective. Once the cone of hard flames and soft flames had calmed down, he noticed something. The whole top half of the robot that was previously engulfed in his flames was gone. Snapping out of his shock, Izuku quickly ignited his gloves once more and went down to the pinned girl and came across the sight of his two girlfriends helping the pinned girl up. Landing beside them. "Man, that was exhausting," Izuku exclaimed when he touched down on the ground. "Yeah, well, if Ya had not decided to use that new experimental super move you made, you wouldn't be so exhausted," La Brava shrieked at him while berating him more for his recklessness. But luckily for Izuku, he was saved by the bell or well buzzer. "That's time," Present Mike yelled across the prior battlefield. "If anyone is injured, please make your way to the gate. Medical help will shortly be there as their team helps the injured that can't move." As soon as Izuku heard Present Mike's announcement, he quickly turned to Minori, who he had noticed was checking the girl for injuries earlier, and asked if she was okay. "Oh yay, she's got a split in her right leg and sprained ankle on her left, as well as some scrapes from trying to grip the ground trying to get away from the zero-pointer, but besides that and some quirk exhaustion, she's fine. Oh, and her name's Kanoko Komori, and she wanted to say thanks for saving her, but she's too shy to say it." Minori bluntly monologues in the way he had luckily was able to drill into her head to do while and after a fight. "Oh," Izuku starts. "Can she move, or should we wait for Recovery Girl here?" "We should wait here. Also, how did you know it was Recovery Girl?" While she said this, she tilted her head to look behind him. Izuku wasn't surprised though. He had known Recovery Girl was part of UA's staff and his instincts had told him she was approaching. "Do any of you need some help?" Recovery Girl started. "Oh dear, that looks like it hurts here, let me heal that," Recovery Girl stated as she walked to Kanoko and kissed her on the forehead, causing it to glow. If Izuku was less exhausted, he would have been geeking out over it. "Oh and boy," Recovery Girl soon said, getting Izuku's attention as she walked away. "It would be best if you were easy on your hands. It seems like you slightly bruised your wrist with that troublesome super move you used." Surprised, the group of four looked at Izuku's hands and saw very light bruising at his wrist. But that was soon less important to Izuku, as when he looked down he saw his wrist was bruised, but then his eyes caught an unfamiliar glint of red and his eyes trailed to his ring and noticed that one of the onyx stones around the orange gem on his ring was cracked and seemed to shine red. "Wow, when did this crack? Does this mean my quirk is maturing or evolving? Is this why I was able to wipe out the zero-pointer?" Izuku quickly lost himself into his not-so-private thoughts on what the crack meant, but eventually he was knocked out of it by the sensation of three objects slowly making their way up his body. Looking down in surprise, he noticed La Brava had already made it on his shoulder, with Minori quickly following her. "Wait," Izuku thought, "what's climbing up my back then?" But Izuku was quickly given his answer, though, when legs wrapped their way around his neck and hands take small tufts of his hair as he felt someone sit down on his neck, shoulder blades, all the while his girlfriends looked at him in amusement. Trying, and failing, to see who was on his neck, he quickly asked what was so funny and who was on him. Lightly snorting, La Brava began speaking. "You were so lost in your thoughts you just said yes to everything we told and asked you. Wow. To answer your second question, it's Kanoko. Since me and Minor learned her lesson, we know she can't keep up with you, and before you ask, she's coming with us because me and Minori invited her over. Oh, and here's her phone number." Unknown to Izuku, they had known he was out of it and made a plan to get Izuku to let Kanoko join their relationship. Furthermore, Izuku numbly took his phone back that now had Kanoko's number in it. But unknown to the girls, Izuku's instincts started connecting dots in his head and made him realize what was going on. Sadly for them, Izuku couldn't hold back a jab since they called him out on his unawareness. "Wow, La Brava, Minori, you both work fast." Sputtering in embarrassment at being caught, they both quickly avoided eye contact with him, all the while he felt Kanoko's legs tighten around his neck, because of being caught or him beginning to walk to the exit he wouldn't know. A few trains and parkour jumps later, with some screaming passengers on board. Soon they were at Izuku's house, opening the door and slightly ducking so the girls wouldn't hit their heads. He knew he was tall, so it was a possibility. He took off his shoes while calling to his mom he was home, and after some fussing from La Brava and Minori and embarrassed protests from Kanoko, he took the girls' shoes for them as well, all the while in the same position, and then began the trek to the kitchen, where just as he was about to enter, his mom appeared and unexpectedly heard a gasp of surprise from Kanoko. So while Izuku was most of the time dense, he knew his mom was hot. Yes, she had been getting pudgy when it was found he was quirkless because of stress eating. But she then stopped stress eating when he got his quirk, and realizing she needed to work off the pudginess, began to work out and somehow bounced back hotter than before. When Mitsuki Bakugo found her friend hotter than ever before, she quickly started getting his mom to start doing modeling with her. Nowadays, when it comes to modeling, he could easily find his mom and Mitsuki on some front covers of top model magazines, so he wasn't surprised that Kanoko reacted in surprise. After all, when Minori found out, she quickly muttered something about getting rid of her special material. He had teased her about that for months before he let it go. He soon snapped back into awareness and noticed his mom giving him a knowing smirk, one he returned full-heartedly, making his mom's smirk grow into a full smile. "Why, hello. Who might you be?" "KK Kanoko Komori." Kanoko stuttered out, still in shock of seeing a top-ranking model that could be seen everywhere, all the while thinking, no wonder he looks so cute, his own girlfriends being the same size as me helps. "Well, are you staying over for dinner, Kanoko-san?" Inko questioned the third diminutive plush-sized girl. "I need to talk to Izuku about him, about possibly having an unknown fetish for short girls. But not too soon, this looks too adorable with them all riding on top of him like that. Inko privately thought to herself as she overtly took out her phone and started taking pictures of the group of 4. I will be Midoriya-san. Kanoko stuttered out once more but luckily seemed to be gaining her bearings. Welp, Izuku started, let's go help her set up dinner. Yay! The 3 girls chorused. With the UA staff, Nedzu started, when you said the child was strong I was not expecting this, Toshinori-san. Nedzu stated as he watched the loop of the surveillance on Izuku Midoriya. I wasn't expecting the child to be this strong either. He didn't even use the suit he made from flames from 10 months ago, and besides recovery girls saying he looked slightly tired and there was an extremely light bruise at his wrist, young Midoriya looked raring to go. Toshinori stated while watching Izuku disintegrate the top half of the 0-pointer. Wait. A shaggy hobo-looking man known as Eraserhead started. You're telling me he didn't try his hardest? Before Eraserhead could say anything further he was interrupted. Now Shota, I'm sure he was holding back for the other 2, after all Toshinori-san was there when he activated it, and he said that it just activating burnt everything around him. Imagine if he used it while they were still on him. The dominatrix known as Midnight said to pacify Eraserhead. Besides, a white-haired man known as the Hero Blood Vlad said following up Midnight's statement, if he had wasted his time using that fire suit it might have used more stamina and he would have most likely not have had enough stamina to take out the 0-pointer and the girl Kanoko Komori would have been gravely hurt. Grumbling, Eraserhead conceded to their reasoning. Besides, no matter how much he disliked it, the kid is obviously smart if he found out about the team system. It's not in the handbook and Nedzu has only made one statement about it but that was 12 years ago and the media had basically brushed past it when it was said. It's information that's rarer than even someone finding out about me. Eraserhead admitted to himself. So everyone, Nadu cheerily stated. What's the verdict? While we did not say it, not only were we judging to see if he got the required amount of points, which he did, but also you all have to decide if the 2 students are allowed to go with young Midoriya. I say let him in, Midnight said coyly. After all I would normally be worried about a hot-blooded male sharing a room with 2 girls in the dorms but a little digging and it just so happens that the 2 already live with him and just so happen to be his girlfriends. That in normally room's a problem but the whole time the 3 were here the 2 girls stayed on him. They didn't even bother taking their seats in the auditorium. Well that's one. How about the rest of you? Nedzu said in his too happy voice. Slowly the rest of the staff present accepted the support students until it finally went to Eraserhead. As Eraserhead was about to state his judgment Toshinori's phone pinged loudly. Wondering who would message All Might everyone's attention was on him. Slowly realizing they weren't going to let it go he got his phone out to see who and what it was, and saw it young Midoriya. What people don't know is after the sludge villain was captured Toshinori quickly went after Izuku to give him his phone number so he could keep an eye on the boy and his progress. Ah, it's from young Midoriya, and before you ask we traded contacts after the sludge villain was detained. Let's see. Oh. You all may want to see this. Backquote. After that statement Toshinori quickly handed it to Nedzu who then connected it to the computer and showed an enlarged image of the message, and what it said shocked everyone. All Might. After the exam I noticed something. I think my quirk is, I don't think it's evolving but it's maturing. Here, under the message was a picture of young Midoriya's ring that was his quirk that seeing the small hand had to be when he had it registered. But then there was a picture under it was the ring on a bigger hand but what was important was that one of the stones around his ring was cracked and it seemed like something was gleaming red underneath the stone. Oh ho, Nedzu said interested. What an interesting development. I believe I know your answer then Eraserhead. With a small nod of his head Nedzu spun around and picked up a stamp before slamming it on a paper. That paper was the approval or denial of the 2 support students, and marked across it was a blocky text that said, approved. A week waiting for the acceptance should have been mind-melting to the quintet but truly it flashed by for them after Izuku took Kanoko home and then proceeded to pick her up the next day. Only 3 days into the week and Kanoko officially became a part of their relationship. It was nothing spectacular just when Inko distracted La Brava and Minori. Kanoko climbed up Izuku's back, and after getting to her spot on his neck, she timidly whispered she wanted to join, and the rest is history. That end, with a surprisingly cooperative Minori, they began showing her their quirks and hers to them, where they began doing combos, and what a dangerous combo they made. Surprisingly, Kanoko can make her quirk more effective in humidity, so she always carries a squirt gun, but she has no control over the heat. But with Izuku just heating up the air around him, and her shooting water everywhere, her quirk instantly became very dangerous, they found out. Soon the rest of the week passed in a blur of motion, from doing combos to the end of the week, when a letter came in, saying that Izuku Midoriya and the support students Minori Minata and Aluz La Brava have been accepted. Quickly they began packing to move into the doors, and now it's the present, walking through the doors of the dorm and meeting their future classmates. Present, we start with Izuku and the trio of girls on their respective places on him, with multiple boxes around him, both his and the girls, and stepped through the doors into the dorm. 1A had been waiting as a whole to begin introductions to one another, but 2 people were still missing. Soon the dorm doors opened, and it confused them on what they were seeing. At the door was a guy who had green eyes and equally green hair, who seemed to be nearly as tall as the tallest one in class, the one with multiple arms, and a beautiful ring on his finger, but besides that he had no real defining features so far. But what had gotten their notice is the 3 girls that were riding on him, all 3 holding small boxes, while he held a really big box stacked with other smaller boxes on top. He soon walked in like it was an everyday occurrence to have 3 girls riding on top of you, and calmly walked past the class to go to the stairs. After doing this a few more times, while the whole class watched in stunned silence, not wanting to break the spell, waiting for him to be done first. Finally, Izuku said as he walked downstairs and saw the last of the boxes were put up, turning around. Izuku had turned around and saw his whole future class awkwardly staring, not knowing where to begin, and trailed off awkwardly. Deciding it was best to get the obvious out of the way, he began to explain, or he was going to, before he heard a startling similar scream. What the hell? Suddenly a strikingly familiar face was upon him. She was short, only to up about his waist, but she was up to his eye level right now. She could easily be mistaken as a relative to him for her looks. She had long green hair that went down to her mid-back and green eyes. Her name was Tatsumaki. And how did he recognize her? Welp, we will need a flashback. One day when Izuku was till 9, his mom suddenly said they were going somewhere. When he got home, as they took the trains, they after some time got to a faculty lab looking place. That's when his mom began speaking. Honey, we're just going to be here for a bit. The scientists here are doing a study of telekinetic quirk users, and they already found people with a strong and mediocre telekinesis. They just needed someone with weak telekinesis. Just as she finished speaking, they walked into a large room and saw a small group of scientists with 2 girls already there. One looked about his age, but suddenly she looked at them and he was suddenly reminded of Bakugo. Seriously? Is green hair just the color for telekinetics? He was given the distinct impression that she was less die and more dumbass. As odd as it sounded, he felt that she was somehow less egotistic than Bakugo, but just nearly as infuriating. Looking past her, he saw a girl was slightly taller than the girl beside her, but he was given the impression she was the annoying one's sister. He also got the impression that she was actually the annoying one's little sister. You don't have 2 girls with you constantly that don't look their age and not learn how to identify when someone did not look their age, because the annoying one looked like she was shorter than she should be. A scientist began. Please come in, Mrs. Midoriya. This one on my right. He then pointed to the annoying one, is Tatsumaki, and this one on my left. He then pointed who Izuku believed to be her little sister, is Fubuki. They're sisters, right? Izuku, even with his instincts maturing him, he was still an innocent child, and interrupted the scientist before he could continue. Yes, duh. So, Izuku interrupted again, is that one, pointing to the scientist's left, Fubuki, right? Is she the little sister? Everyone was thrown for a loop, but none more so than Tatsumaki. Yes, that's right. The scientist stuttered out, having been thrown for a loop and trying to get his bearings. Luckily a fellow scientist came to his aid. I believe it's time for the tests. Yes, let's begin. If you 3 would follow me, and don't worry ma'am, your son will be safe with us. Some time passed and then it was time to leave, but right before they could leave Tatsumaki approached Izuku. "How did you know I was the oldest?" she stated bluntly, and she got a blunt answer back. "It was your eyes." With that statement Izuku skipped off, not knowing just how much he had made an impression on Tatsumaki. Present. "Oh hey Tatsumaki, how have you been?" Izuku casually asked. For some reason he suddenly found himself in a playful mood. What do you care?" Tatsumaki responded. Suddenly Izuku grinned mischievously. Maybe Minori was rubbing off on him some? "If I didn't care, why would I ask?" As he said this he threw his arm around her shoulder and leaned on her, pushing her down slightly, then followed up with putting his head on the top of her head. Tatsumaki tried, and failed, to push him off of her as she responded with, "It's called human decency, jackass." But aren't you a dwarf?" "I know plenty about dwarven decency, just ask these three." He finished by pointing his thumb to the three girls on his back individually. Suddenly he felt a force around him and he felt he was about to get forcibly moved and was prepared to activate his gloves, but then someone made their way into the conversation. "You know Tatsu, it's funny to see someone to have the guts to tease you, and it's better I can tell they can back up teasing you." Surprised by the voice Izuku quickly looked over Tatsumaki's head to see who spoke, and instantly regretted it. When he saw her he was sure the world was spinning because his instincts were going haywire and felt lightheaded. But then the moment passed and he got a good look at the voice. It was a girl around just shorter than Tatsumaki, but that's where the similarities stopped and the weirdness to begin. Her left eye was nearly blinding white while her pupil was void black, and her right eye was the exact opposite of her left eye. Her hair was a swirl of black and white starting from her head down, and her lips did the same, and her skin had random lines of black and random strips of white, while what wasn't lines swapped between tan to pale like a kaleidoscope. After looking at her for a moment Izuku had to put his head down. "Hey, I get that a lot. People's eyes don't have time to register the white and black and makes people disoriented." Hearing this, Izuku sat the trio of girls that were on him onto the ground. Before standing to his full height, and looked at the unnamed girl right in the eye. The girl thought he was just trying to be brave or trying to impress her like some before him. But then he activated his quirk, all of it. Suddenly the area around him was filled with flames. As they died down everyone was treated to an intimidating but also awe-inspiring sight. He still looked the same but now there were gloves on his hands, and he was dressed in a sharp but fancy suit that was black everywhere but had an orange undershirt, as well as his forehead had a flame coming from it. But what was most noticeable was his piercing orange eyes. Suddenly he started walking up to the black and white swapping girl, and staring into her eyes the whole time, introduced himself. "Hi," slightly smiling, "the name is Izuku Midoriya." Stunned they saw how he stared at her without so much as flinching. Eventually she found her voice. "Oh, my name is Kurai Hikari," Kurai said slightly stunned. "Okay you two, you can flirt later." Tatsumaki soon interrupted, and in embarrassment Izuku released his quirk as he looked toward Tatsumaki again. "Oh sorry Tatsumaki, it's great to see you again, and it's nice to meet you Kurai." Izuku then picked up the trio of girls waiting on him and went up the stairs. Soon silence reigned over the rest of 1A but it was soon broken. "So am I the only one that wants him Kiro?" the froggy girl known as Suyu Asui said. Soon very high-sadly people started leaving, and all who were left in the commons was Suyu Asui, Kyoka Jiru, Tatsumaki, and Kurai Hikari. Slowly they looked at one another, all of them similar heights, and they all thought the same thing. "We need to talk to those girls," he came in with. Soon they all slowly headed back to their rooms to wait out the rest of the day, but not before they all traded one another's phone numbers. It was the next day, and the first day of school. Izuku was in his room cuddled up with Labrava cuddled in his right arm, Minori cuddled in his left arm, and Kanoko cuddled on his chest, and was trying and failing to get them up so they can begin school. "Come on you three, we need to get ready," Izuku said exasperated. In response to what he said he heard a muffled drawn-out no come from his left, and watched as Kanoko tries to use her puppy eyes on him, To his right he felt rather than saw La Brava pout against the right side of his chest. "Come on you three, up we go." In one movement he hugged all three to his chest and got up from his bed, holding them like they were stuffed animals. They looked at two, with them not so much as moving and just limply hanging in his arms. In response to them not moving, he went to one of his shelves and said, "Well, if you three are going to act like stuffed animals, I'm going to treat you like ones." He then proceeded to walk to his wall to where his shelf is and put all three of them on it, then turned to his drawer, all the while keeping an eye on the girls and watching them all turn deep red when he started undressing, and then their faces turned disappointed when he put on his required uniform for UA. "Okay you three, that's enough of a free show. Go get change." Then they did something he didn't expect. They hopped down and just got dressed right there, and then they all just winked at him in sync and left. All Izuku could think to himself is, "Ah, it's going to be one of those days." With a slight ting of worry in his voice, he began the trek down to the commons to get food. Moments later, Izuku with the girl on their respective places were in front of the door to enter 1A. Sure, they had moved to the dorm, but entering the classroom would make it official, so shaking off his nerves, while also noticing what was most likely his teacher crawling towards him in a sleeping bag, he opened the door, and was immediately hit by something soft-ish. Hitting the ground hard, he took the time to question why his instincts didn't warn him of anything. He began to figure out what hit him, so he started to move his hands to his face, and as his hands landed on what he figured hit him, and was currently covering his face, he heard a muffled eep, and suddenly he had his sight back, and was greeted with the very red face of Tatsumaki, his hands still on what he now figured out to be her ass. Blushing red, he ripped his hands off of Tatsumaki's ass, but not before giving another involuntary squeeze that resulted in her becoming even more red in the face. He noticed a group of three approaching. One he already knew, Kurai Hikari, and then the other two he didn't know. One had the features of a frog and could only be described as cute, especially when she put her finger on her chin and her tongue found itself hanging from her mouth limply. The other girl had the air of a punk girl and had elongated earlobes with earphone jacks at the ends, with one of her fingers spinning one of her earlobes in slight nervousness under a mask of neutrality. "Ah," the frog girl started, "sorry about that. The name's Suyu Asui and the girl next to me is Kyoka Juru. I can introduce myself, you know." Kyoka said slightly defensively. "I know, but I wanted to not waste time." "Sorry to interrupt, but how is it your fault that ahem, Tatsumaki flew into me?" Izuku asked, slightly confused. Just as Suyu was going to explain that it was a dare, and that Tatsumaki said that no matter how hard she threw her she wouldn't feel it, but she was interrupted by a dreary new voice. "If you have time to chat, you have time to be busy," the new voice droned on. Quickly looking around, the group found a sleeping bag with the man in it that Izuku had noticed earlier. Soon the sleeping bag man moved, wiggled his way past the group. Once he got to the middle of the classroom, he just laid there, all the while the group looked on until a pink-haired girl screamed. "Boog!" The pink girl screamed in disgust but was quickly interrupted by the aforementioned bug. "It took you a full minute for one of you to notice me." He got out of his sleeping bag and dumped a pile of clothes on the floor. "Put these on and meet me at the testing area." Dismissed. Catching on quick, Izuku dashed to the clothing to get his and the girl's clothing before dashing out of the room to where his instincts told him to go. Soon he was the first one out, and at the testing site, his teacher was already there. At least one of you is rational." Slightly ticked off by his teacher's antics, he told him. No, it just shows how much people will trust someone when they don't even give their name. I have my instincts, I already know you're the teacher and to do what you said, but the others just see a hobo, no matter how impossible for one to be in here, and you didn't even give your hero name at the least." Aizawa was slightly perturbed by his attitude but realized he's used to knowing what he is talking about, and painfully so he was right. Aizawa had been planning to do what he normally does, but that got thrown off when he noticed that the kid in front of him noticed him back in the hallway, and then Tatsumaki coming through the door and him getting to see an impromptu session of teenage drama in full throttle. The kid had been throwing him off, even before he came into the place, because he knew that this kid had already experienced loss. Aizawa made a point to research every one of his students, and after some research on Izuku, Midoriya found just how powerful the kid was, and if what the kid said when Toshinori got a message from him, he would be getting even more powerful soon, but had also lost someone close to him. He found a video of him using the flame suit Yagi mentioned, and after doing more digging found that Katsuki Bakugo had been a family friend to the Midoriyas. Aizawa was soon brought out of his revelry by some more of his students coming out. Okay, first things first, I am Shota Aizawa, but you all will call me Aizawa-sensei, and today you all are doing a quirk test assessment today. Midoriya, please step forward. Following his call, Izuku stepped forward and caught a ball Aizawa threw at him. Throw that ball as far as you can using your quirk. The only rule is to stay in the circle. Nodding to show he understood, Izuku then walked to the middle of the white-lined circle and activated his quirk. Soon orange flames burst away from his hands, revealing gloves over them, and then got into a pitcher's pose, and really activated his quirk. Soon orange flames were flickering from his palms as they heated up. Before he threw, he yelled out, "Cover your ears." Soon everyone followed his command, none sooner than the trio of girls and Kyoka. And they all watched as a giant cone of flame emerged from his palm and propulsed the ball away. Soon they all heard a ping and saw the teacher reveal the score. 5,000 kilometers. While slightly overkill, you all should be striving for this, to go as far as possible, and remember, plus ultra. The chapter, soon everyone had lined up and were put in pairs to do the 50-meter run. After some time, the fastest being who had boldly proclaimed to be Ida Tenya, it finally got to the last two people waiting. Midoriya, Hikari, line up. Aizawa gruffly called. Following his command, Izuku and Kurai lined up and began to wait for the go. Go. The robotic sound went off and both students leapt into action. Following it, Kurai began to become enshrouded in a smoke-like darkness where she was swallowed up, and the shroud seemed to start twisting inward before collapsing in on itself, where it then revealed the shroud of smoky darkness to suddenly pop up at the finish line. 0.5 seconds. Beep, 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 go. The robot droned on starting the race again and signaled for Izuku to go. Following the go, Izuku immediately formed his gloves and started up with hard flames and immediately zoomed to the end in a blur of speed. 0.3 seconds. Test over. The robot once again robotically spoke, but this time everyone forgot their restraints and began talking about how fast both of them were, and Ida somehow being both sad at being slower but proud of his classmates' abilities, when then a girl with gray cat-like eyes and a spiky raven-colored ponytail spoke up. It just said the test is over, but what about the two girls that are always with him, Aizawa-sensei? As she finished speaking, she pointed to the three girls that were climbing back up to their respective spots, immediately stopped and looked at her with deers caught in headlights look plastered on their faces, before slowly continuing to climb while awkwardly looking back at the other students. But soon Aizawa broke the awkward air. All three of them are in a group approved by the principal in the beginning of the tests, assigning them individually, as Midoriya being the leader while Mineta and Minami aka La Brava are assigned as support to him, making them only one student in the eyes of the school, even if they are three separate people. This does not happen often unless a group of people, one being the leader and the others with support-type quirks, directly contact the school and ask for permission, along with legal papers being signed. Ending his slight speech, he swiftly moved on, leaving everyone who did not understand in the dust, and quickly moved on with the other tests. Time flew by for Izuku and the girls going through the tests, most of the time Izuku doing them, but sometimes one of the other girls doing them. Like Minori doing the side-to-side test, and La Brava doing the flexibility test, both getting the top on both, Izuku getting the top on the rest. The test rank were soon shown after the test ended, Izuku being ranked first. Aizawa quickly wiggled away in his sleeping bag while dismissing them for the day. Though hesitant, they soon returned to their dorms. A few hours later, as Izuku and his girls were in his dorm, each doing their own thing, Izuku doing weights, La Brava doing yoga. Who knew? Well, you do now, in my story at least. Izuku also was sneaking glances at La Brava every once in a while. La Brava noticing and putting on more of a show as she bent over Minori at their shared computer, sharing a seat with Kanoko as they browsed more adult popular trends, giggling every one in a while. when suddenly a banging started at their door, swiftly followed by Ida's voice. Please report to the commons downstairs. The majority of the class has decided to do a type of meet and greet downstairs to get to know one another better. Please be downstairs at your earliest convenience. Followed by a loud bang and the sound of his footsteps, leaving the 4 occupants in silence. I bet it was his head that made that loud bang. Minori soon broke the silence with this statement, causing the others to follow along as they started different degrees of laughter at the thought of Ida bowing to the door and not so much as flinching as he hit it, being as serious as possible even in the event of such a comical action, but soon composed themselves and got changed quickly to actually greet their future classmates as it had gotten interrupted earlier. Soon the quintet found themselves downstairs in the commons and looked to be the last ones to arrive. Spotting 3 empty seats left, Izuku Swifty sat down in the middle of the 3 chairs, and just as he sat down a pink-skinned girl jumped up and began speaking. Well, it looks like everyone's here. I'll kick this off first. My name is Mina Ashido and my quirk is acid, allowing me to melt through anything. Oh, and I like anything cute and odd. With an energetic voice, Ashido kicked off the introduction with a wide smile on her face, where she then sat down and gestured to the person next to her. What Izuku could only be described as an invisible girl, such as the girl-like clothing she was wearing but was invisible but looked to have girl-like curves as well, where clothes also were. Hi everyone. My name's Hagakure Toru. And I lick. Izuku, being who he was, tuned everything out at the same time, paid attention to what everyone said and their quirks. When finally it got to the last few left, Izuku and the girls had already introduced themselves. Izuku felt himself snap to attention as it got to the last few. Well, my name is Kurai Hikari, and my quirk is Dark Light, which may sound redundant, and no Momo. I cannot spell Momo's last name, so Momo it is. Not that Dark Light. To put it simply, my quirk allows me to do a type of yin-yang thing, the light and dark and such, allowing to control light and dark, but it also messes with my personality, but also allows me to also influence others at the same time, but not to the extent of change who they are, just making them act more on their good or bad sides. Soon after, though impossible to tell because of the inability to look at for the others and her own skin being how it is from Izuku's perspective, it was impossible to tell if she was embarrassed, but her scramble to sit down and her head being put down, they thought she might be, but was soon followed up by Tatsumaki. HMPH. My name is Tatsumaki and my quirk is called God's Mind. And from what you all have seen, it should be obvious what my quirk is. It's a type of telekinesis, but it's the strongest to date and allows me to break many physics that hold many of you down. That's it. Her short and impersonal speech made many want to take a step back from her. Of course, they would then realize that's pointless because of her quirk, but she was then followed by the very last person. Hi. My name's Himiko Toga, and my quirk is called Shapeshifter. I love cute things and I love blood. I hope I can be friends with all of you. Everyone besides Izuku and his harem. They are not a harem. Izuku vehemently denied. A hem trio of girlfriends, and of course the 4 future ones, looked around awkwardly until Suyu broke the silence. Well, I hope to be friends with you too. Call me Sue. Squealing excitedly, Toga rushed over to her and pulled her into a hug before she started animatedly talking to her. Slowly everyone began doing their own thing, either leaving or starting a new game at the console in the common room, marking the end of the first day at UA. He was back, in the astral place where he first got his quirk, but this time, next to the orange sun, was another. It looked like it was stone, but it had cracks that let red light seep through. It was clearly connected to the ring, but before he could do anything else, he heard familiar crackles of an explosion about to starting. Instantly he threw his body to his right as an explosion went off where his head once was. Turning, he looked to see off red-colored smoke slowly wafting through the air, and as the air cleared, there was Bakugo, someone he had personally seen die, but as he looked into his angry red eyes, they seemed to almost glow, but before he could do anything, "Fight me, Deku. Prove to me you deserve this power." With those final words, Bakugo launched himself at him. The flames of his explosions were now pure red, and just barely dodging by a hair didn't mean that he wasn't hit. The power behind his explosion were far stronger than before, sending Izuku skidding back even though he wasn't directly hit. Getting over his shock, he tried to start his flames, but they didn't come when they were supposed to. With a creaking sound, he turned his head towards the source of his power, only to find the orange sun from before was clashing with the stone, red crack-filled sun. They were pushing against one another, and what worried him most was that the red cracked stone sun was winning. The echoing sound of steps filled the air. Turning, he saw Bakugo, his face pulled into a frown, slowly making his way to him, and in the next moment he moved faster than he had ever before, using his explosions to power his run, just like how he used his flames himself, and grabbed his face. The last thing he heard was, "Tisk, you aren't ready yet," before the sound of an explosion rang in his ears. With a jerk he tried to get up, except he found himself trapped. But before he could start panicking, he took in the room. A single streak of light revealing dust lazily floating through the air. The beam of light somewhat highlighting the smile on one of his few All Might posters they had let him keep. Then realization dawned on him. With a slow exhale of air he released the tension in his muscles, having realized he was in his room. Peering down, he caught the sight of his girlfriends, all on his chest instead of in their normal places. Trying to be quiet, he carefully maneuvered himself out from beneath them, and sat them carefully on the bed. Stretching to work out the weariness in his muscles, he did a few warm-ups, then, with a shake of his head he started towards the door, and quietly opened it, before just as quietly slipping out, and carefully closing it. Turning, he took a deep breath before he moved down the hallway. Looking between the stairs and the elevator, he decided that he needed to clear his head some, so he started the trek down the stairs, letting his mind wander over the dream. Once he got down to the commons area, he casually walked to the fridge in the connected kitchen. Before finding two of the items he had left in it, ignoring the odd reflective thermos in it, he quickly got the two items he needed out and sat them on the counter next to the fridge. With a quick search he found a cabinet filled with cups, and got a tall clear glass one, and sat it down, reached over and poured the first ingredient in it, before reaching over and grabbing the second and pouring some of it in the glass, before quickly finding a drawer full of spoons before using it to mix the two ingredients together. Find a bowl real quick, he filled it with water before putting the spoon in it and sitting both in the sink. Spoon still in the bowl, before grabbing his glass, but he then heard voice behind him. "Is that chocolate milk?" A girl giggled behind him. Quickly turning he found one of his classmates, Himiko Toga if he remembered correctly. She was in a large cardigan that hung below her knees, most likely her version of PJs. He also noticed that her hair was down. A flash of Bakugo with his spiky hair grew out all the way past his shoulders appeared in his mind. A punishment from Auntie Mitsuki refusing to let him get it cut till he fixed his attitude in the house. He quickly snapped out of it, looking to see that she was still expecting an answer but had the thermos from earlier in the microwave. "Oh yeah, it's a little silly, but no matter how hard I try I'm not much of a morning person, so I have to have some type of stimulant, but coffee tastes horrible to me, but then my mom introduced me to this and I've been hooked ever since." He gave her a small, awkward smile, her only giggling before reaching to get the thermos, still looking at his glass of chocolate milk, but as she reached it her hand flinched back from the heat. "Ah. Are you okay?" Izuku worriedly grabbed her thermos, sitting it on the counter, then closing the microwave, before grabbing her hand. Looking closely he saw that the tips of her left hand were slightly red. Hearing a giggle, he looked up, seeing Himiko giggling at his actions, and he quickly released her hand, realizing what he did. "Oh sorry, I should have asked first." Izuku spoke worriedly. "Oh no, it's fine, but if you're this worried over what couldn't even be a first-degree burn, I'm pretty sure your hero name will end up being the Flame Hero. Dadzuku. Hee. She quickly collapsed into laughter. He let out a few chuckles himself, finding the name pretty funny, before he soon collected himself. "Well, if you don't mind, may I?" With a gesture he went to grab her hand again, and her, obviously curious, let him grab her hand that she had burned earlier. Himiko had mixed feelings about the boy in front of her. Well, him and Shoto Todoroki, the son of Endeavor, she would have to see if he was a fake hero or not. She hadn't had enough time to really see, but the boy, he had a fire quirk, just like Endeavor. He also had 3 separate girlfriends, though they all seemed to smell of love, so they probably loved one another, so it was probably a poly relationship. but he seemed so worried over her only getting a slight burn. He also seemed modest, and while he didn't seem very prideful, he was so powerful that it was like he was being prideful, but wasn't really being prideful. She felt a shiver go through her as his eyes that were originally pools of liquid emerald became pure orange, like a fire was burning in his eyes. She felt her hand slowly heat up, but before it could get uncomfortable all the heat that was in her fingertips disappeared, almost like they cooled off. Looking up she could only dumbly mutter, Are you able to control heat? He chuckled, his eyes slowly returning back to emerald. You see, like most fire quirk users, I can only control my flames, but what most don't realize is that most of the time, it's that we control heat that we generate, but a loophole that I've found is that if a fire user applies heat to an already heated object, well, physics don't distinguish between natural and generated heat, so if one does that, the two natural and generated heats mix together, and allows them to control the previously naturally generated heat. I actually got the idea from the saying, fight fire with fire. Himiko couldn't stop her eyes from going wide. From what he said, he could completely reinvent how people who have fire quirks use their quirks. Besides everything else that would make him special, like his girlfriends or quirk, when he talked to people he seemed so normal, like he wasn't the guy who had a super powerful quirk, multiple girlfriends, super intelligent, #1 in basically everything they had done so far, and finally it was like he wasn't scared or disgusted by her. You do know that I like blood, right? Izuku looked in Himiko's eyes, and knew that what she asked was a loaded question. You said you love blood, right? Besides it obviously being for your quirk, I can only assume that from your reaction people were disgusted by or scared of your quirk, right? So from there I can guess that most likely you weren't allowed blood, willingly, did you? And that thermos probably is filled with blood, isn't it? As he talked her eyes seemed to go impossibly wide, and instead of her eyes being filled with, almost, insanity when she talked about her quirk and love for blood when they introduced themselves, instead they were filled with confusion and fear of rejection. Takes a moment to look her in the eye, before taking a slow step back. Himiko, let me ask you something. You know my quirk revolves around fire, but the question is that all it can do? With a slow movement he went to the kitchen table, and grabbed an apple from the basket sitting on it. With that he turned back around to Himiko's face. With an outstretched hand towards her, he held the apple in the palm of his hands, and then let his true flames light up. Himiko's couldn't deny that what she saw didn't make her shiver in slight fear. Izuku was a hero hopeful, but most likely, if he had ever been a villain no one could have stopped him. That was the only thing she could think of as she saw Ring flow orange, spewing out completely orange flames, and saw as anywhere the flames made contact with the apple, it turned into stone, and only a second passed before they receded, leaving a stone-looking apple in his hand. With a small smile he tossed it to her, letting her feel the weight off the now stone apple, leaving her to contemplate what she had been shown just now. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, spam red hearts in comment box.